The King's Avatar audiobook by Kevin Chapter 621 hype for the playoffs spread like wildfire. As the most intense competition of every season, this was a huge way to rake in money for the Alliance. The teams that failed to enter the playoffs could only watch the happenings with envy. They wouldn't receive a piece of the pie for broadcasting the playoffs, ticket revenue, advertising, etc. These were the concerns of the club owners and managers. For the pro players, the playoffs was the highest stage obtainable and the place where they could attain the greatest glory. As for the spectators, the playoffs was a time to enjoy high-level competition. Glory wasn't so popular that there would be discussions about it all over the streets, but in the internet cafe, Glory forums, Glory global chat and guild chats, the places where Glory players gathered, the playoffs was undoubtedly the hottest topic. Everyone passionately discussed who they thought would take the championships. From the online polls, Blue Rain, Samsara, and Tiny Herb were the most favored teams. Tyranny was a bit less favored. As for the four other teams, the meager amount of support they received was due to their zealous fans. After all, no one could give a convincing argument for why any of these four teams would be the winner. Who would be the champion? The members of Team Happy were calmer in comparison to the public. Ye Xiu and Wei Chen had been a part of the pro scene before. Both of them were experienced players too. They had already adapted to their current circumstances. Since they weren't participating in the playoffs, why would they be excited? The two calmly analyzed the weaknesses and strengths of each participating team. As for the other three, after Chen Guo turned her back on Excellent Era, she invested her support into Team Happy instead. She didn't really care who became the champion. As for Tang Ru and Steamed Bun, they hadn't played long enough to favor any of the teams. Now that they were a part of a team, they obviously didn't have any favorites. While people outside were discussing this question fervently, even as an aspiring pro team, Team Happy appeared a bit too calm. On the other hand, they were much more interested in Excellent Era. After all, they were an approaching reality. However, this reality put a huge amount of pressure on them. After Excellent Era got relegated, they calmly placated their fans. They had clearly prepared for everything long beforehand. They definitely had detailed plans for how to maintain their competitive state and return to the Alliance. Ye Xiu and the rest of the team knew that Excellent Era would be a fierce boss in the Challenger League. But even Ye Xiu, who had once been the captain of Excellent Era for 7 years, didn't know how much they would progress. Because he knew that, ever since his departure, Excellent Era had gone through bold and decisive changes. That team would never be the same team that he had once struggled for, so of course he wouldn't know how it had changed. We won't be so unlucky as to meet Excellent Era in the first round, right? That would be a joke. In these past 2 days, Wei Chen often cracked these types of jokes to scare everyone. How about you shut your mouth? Ye Xiu often replied in this way. Everyone could tell that the usually calm Ye Xiu felt somewhat nervous towards Wei Chen's jokes. This sort of possibility was theoretically possible. If it actually happened, the Challenger League would no longer be the start of their dreams, but rather the end. With the team's current strength, they didn't need to worry about normal player teams. But in comparison to a professional team like Excellent Era, the difference between them wasn't small. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun were still far from being a pro player's match. Their characters didn't need to be mentioned. Both of their characters were still in the 10th server. Ye Xiu's Lord Grim had a silver weapon, but it was only level 50 right now. Wei Chen's Death Hand was also only level 60. Even if they upgraded their 2 silver weapons to max level, how could 2 silver weapons compare to Excellent Era's characters? A god-level character like One Autumn Leaf had a full set of silver equipment. The disparity between their characters was even larger than the disparity between players. Both teams would be participating in the Challenger League, but the Challenger League only had one winner. This meant that, as long as neither of the two were eliminated early on, they would inevitably meet. In this case, meeting them early on would be much worse than meeting them later. In fact, the later they met, the better. Happy would have more time to improve, whether that be the players themselves or the characters. Fortunately, this was a special feature of an esport competition like Glory. The characters could grow as the season progressed. For example, if the character found a skill book in the game, the character could use it immediately. The character could also switch out his or her old equipment for better equipment. For Ye Xiu, he wouldn't be able to return to the pro scene until next year August. This period of time was enough for the team members and characters to grow, because even if they were participating in the Challenger League, they could also run back to the game and obtain more materials and equipment. When they entered the pro scene, their team would have definitely improved significantly compared to their initial stage. Even after joining the pro scene, they could still grow while competing, because the regular season lasted a long time. A single match wouldn't determine their team's fate. Even if they encountered an incredibly difficult team in the beginning of the season, they still had a huge amount of time to improve. Perhaps by the end of the season, they would be able to enter the playoffs, and at that time, their strength might not lose out to any other team. However, in the Challenger League, a single match could decide your fate. A powerful team like Excellent Era completely messed up Ye Xiu's current plans. Right now, he needed to hurry and build up the team so that it would be strong enough to contest against such a formidable opponent. If Wei Chen's joke became a reality, and they met Excellent Era in the first round, in accordance with the Challenger League schedule, the first match would begin in September. The amount of time that Ye Xiu had originally planned to use to build up the team had now been reduced significantly. How could he not be anxious? Do you think Excellent Era has some dirty trick up their sleeves? From the looks of it, they have quite some enmity with you. If they were to play some trick behind our back and sabotage the competition arrangements with their connections, what would we do if they had our team fight against them in the first match? The more Wei Chen spoke, the fiercer he became. The probability of this happening used to be infinitesimally small, but now he described a situation where the probability would be 100%. If that happens, I'll go across the street and break their glass. Ye Xiu wasn't in a good mood. I'm just saying. Wei Chen knew that he was poking at a sore spot, but he justified himself. If they did that, they might not entirely be letting their emotions affect their decisions. You definitely make them worry as an opponent. They'll also regard you as a formidable opponent in the Challenger League. They know about your situation, and they know that time is of huge importance to our team. In order to ensure their victory, it isn't completely impossible that they would mess with the rules in order to fight your team on the first round. No. You've been a part of Excellent Era for 7 years. Does Excellent Era have the power to do that? You should be much more clear on such matters than me. When Wei Chen finished talking, he looked at Ye Xiu in anticipation, as if he were waiting for Ye Xiu to give him a precise answer. Ye Xiu immediately understood after seeing his expression. Wei Chen wasn't any less worried than him. Wei Chen intentionally said these scary things to irritate him, and also to make himself numb to the possibility. That way, his emotions wouldn't be affected as much. He and Ye Xiu were clear that, even if they faced Excellent Era at the very end of the Challenger League, Excellent Era would still be an extremely difficult opponent for them. Their opponents were a powerful force with 8 years of accumulated resources and experiences. As for them, since Ye Xiu's departure from Excellent Era, it had only been half a year. His second-best player was a middle-aged player who had been retired for almost 6 years. The characters in his possession couldn't even compare to most in-game experts, and they wanted to challenge Excellent Era. Don't say that it would be a miracle. Even the author is getting tired of using this word. After understanding Wei Chen's intentions, Ye Xiu felt deeply moved. He didn't answer with a biting remark like he usually did. Instead, he replied in a serious tone, "I don't know." "You don't know?" Wei Chen didn't want to believe it either. "Of course I don't know. If they actually did that sort of shady business, of course not many would know about it," Ye Xiu said. "FCK, I just want you to make a prediction. You should understand Excellent Era's owner and manager and the current environment in the pro scene. Just analyze the possibility of it happening." Wei Chen said. Everyone in the practice room stopped what they were doing and looked at Ye Xiu, but Ye Xiu just stared at the ceiling and didn't say anything for a long time. "You don't dare be certain, so it's still a possibility, no?" Wei Chen said. "Fine, I'll help ask for you." Ye Xiu suddenly straightened his back. "Ask who?" Wei Chen was puzzled. He saw Ye Xiu open up QQ, and in the team category he clicked on a person's name. "Who's this?" Wei Chen walked over. This person's QQ name was in English. He definitely didn't know who this person was. "Excellent Era's boss," Ye Xiu said as he typed in a message. "I never thought we would actually be opponents." FCK, FCK, FCK. You just directly ran over to ask him. What if he hadn't thought of it and now you reminded of it? Wei Chen said. If he hadn't thought of it, he still wouldn't do it even if I reminded him. If he had planned on doing it, whether or not I remind him about it, he would still do it, Ye Xiu said. Wei Chen repeated his words and then cursed. "Are you saying a tongue twister?" The other side on QQ suddenly lit up and replied. "It's a bitter rivalry too." "Do you think we'll meet in the first round?" Ye Xiu replied. After a short pause, Wei Chen stared at the screen with wide eyes. After a while, the other side replied. "Ha ha, are you scared?" The King's Avatar Chapter 622 Tao Xuan, who was sitting in front of his computer, laughed out loud. He could empathize with how Ye Xiu was feeling right now. Anyone could imagine how much pressure a brand new team would face upon encountering a powerhouse like Excellent Era. For Tao Xuan, participating in the Challenger League truly wasn't anything to be happy about. But he was feeling a bit excited seeing how much worry it was giving Ye Xiu. Tao Xuan didn't know when it started, but he had begun becoming more and more annoyed at how serious Ye Xiu dedicated himself to glory. In the end, wasn't this just a game? What was more important than having fun? But Ye Xiu was extremely passionate and persistent in winning. Whenever he did something, it would always be with victory in mind. But anything else unrelated would always be treated with indifference. Having a passion for victory wasn't a bad thing in itself. From a business perspective, someone with a personality was easier to work with than someone without a personality. However, Ye Xiu refused to cooperate on the business end. Because both sides had signed a long-term contract early on, when they wrote up the contract, they hadn't thought too far into the future, so the contract didn't have any clauses or terms on cooperating with the business end. It wasn't his fault for being too careless. How could he have imagined that anyone would refuse a win-win cooperation? As the Glory Alliance rapidly developed, the ace players of the teams brought numerous benefits to their respective clubs. The more Tao Xuan saw these benefits pass by him, the more he couldn't sit still. Even though he had a prolific money tree like Sima Cheng, the more he felt the benefits of having Sima Cheng helping the business end, the more he loathed how Ye Xiu wouldn't cooperate with him. Ye Xiu was Excellent Era's ace. He was the king who founded their dominating dynasty. In his hands, he held the famed battle god One Autumn Leaf, and was awarded best partners with the extremely popular Sima Cheng for several years in a row. Ye Xiu was like an enormous gold mine that couldn't be mined. Year after year, day after day passed. It didn't seem like this gold mine would ever be mined. Tao Xuan finally couldn't bear it anymore. If Ye Xiu wouldn't cooperate, why not throw him away? Tao Xuan had thought of doing so a long time ago, but he never made the order because no one could succeed him. He didn't need just anyone who could play a battle mage. One autumn leaf was a top character in glory and required a top-tier god to play it in order for it to have any business value. Correct. Tao Xuan always considered things with the business in mind. He also wanted Ye Xiu to see that after cooperating together, the character and the player would push towards new heights. He hoped that Ye Xiu would feel regret towards refusing a cooperation. He hoped that Ye Xiu would admit that he was wrong. Although there were many battle mage players in the alliance, none of them fit Tao Xuan's requirements. Finding a successor to Ye Xiu was easier said than done. He could only continue waiting until he saw Sun Xiang appear. This youth had talent, a boundless future, mastery over the battle mage class, and didn't have a god-level character. Sun Xiang was without a doubt a fitting successor. The old being replaced by the new was something that teams often had to deal with, but no club was as impatient as Tao Xuan. He had tolerated Ye Xiu for too many years, and a talent like Sun Xiang would quickly be taken away by another team. Excellent Era no longer had complete dominance over the league like in the past. They were just now one of the powerhouses. Tao Xuan not only wanted Sun Xiang to come, he wanted him to immediately take over. He wished he could instantly kick Ye Xiu out. These were Tao Xuan's true thoughts. If he could have done so without any terrible consequences, he would have done so immediately. But there was nothing he could do. Ye Xiu's prestige was just too high. He was still bringing his team to the top. If he suddenly had a successor without even deciding to retire yet and was treated so roughly, the club would be criticized harshly. Tao Xuan placed a great amount of importance on the club's business. The support of the fans was extremely important. After all, no matter how smoothly a business operated, there needed to be supporters to provide the income. Tao Xuan needed to be careful not to offend fans. After thinking it over, even if gently transferred Ye Xiu away, he would come across a lot of obstacles. The fans definitely wouldn't be able to accept it, and Tao Xuan wouldn't be happy with the transfer either. No one knew better than him how capable Ye Xiu was. If he transferred Ye Xiu away, Ye Xiu would become a powerful enemy. The other teams would be laughing at his decision. Thus, the best result would be if Ye Xiu retired forever. Tao Xuan understood this point, so he had made plans long ago. As the owner of a team, he had a lot of work to do. Simply speaking, for a team to run smoothly, the coordination between every department had to be extremely tight. And any cooperation between himself and the team's senior, even if it was just his attitude towards him, could have huge consequences. For example, it was widely known in Team Tyranny that once, Han Wenqing was lecturing a team member when he was interrupted by the boss's phone call. Han Wenqing shouted at the boss and hung up. Did this mean that Han Wenqing had more authority than the boss, or that the boss was actually scared of Han Wenqing? Of course not. A part of it was Han Wenqing's personality. Another part of it was that the boss acted according to his personality. Han Wenqing had immediately picked up the phone, even in this special situation. This minute action showed how much trust he gave to the boss. Many people saw it as a reflection of Han Wenqing's tyranny, but in reality, this was the boss's respect for his team's captain. Trust and respect. The boss and players needed this type of relationship. In particular, the team captain required the boss's strong support. A difference in views could harm the team captain's authority over the team because the players knew who the team truly belonged to, who decided their futures, and who gave them their salaries. If the boss didn't support the team captain would have difficulty being respected by his team. After Tao Xuan decided to give up on Ye Xiu, he had quietly weakened Ye Xiu's authority in the team. It would be hard to avoid Excellent Era's records from being affects. Tao Xuan anticipated it would delince. After all, nothing good could come without sacrifice. In order to make a chance, their records would waver. If their records wavered, the fans would also weaken their support for Ye Xiu. It would make things easier for them to accept his leave. Once Sun Xiang stormed onto the scene, Tao Xuan finally saw the person he needed and finally put his plans into action starting in the 8th scene. All sorts of issues arose in the team, and their record declined drastically. The fans openly complained as Tao Xuan quickly signed an agreement to transfer Sun Xiang over to Excellent Era that winter. However, Tao Xuan hadn't imagined that the team's record would drop so badly. He had underestimated Ye Xiu's importance to the team, but the more it was like this, the more he despised Ye Xiu. In his eyes, Ye Xiu was not their team's core but their team's tyrant. He was a tumor that needed to be removed. Thus, he went along with his original plans. He transferred Sun Xiang over that winter and forced Ye Xiu to retire. Even though the fans were sad, their support for Team Excellent Era didn't change too much just because of a single change. Tao Xuan relaxed. The worst hadn't happened, making him feel like he had passed a huge block. He was still worried about Sima Cheng though. When he decided to kick out Ye Xiu, Tao Xuan had already accepted that he might need to give up on Sima Cheng as well. After all, his tolerance for Ye Xiu had reached his limits. Sima Cheng would cause him to waver over his decision to kick Ye Xiu out of the team and rebuild the team anew. Tao Xuan originally thought everything would progress like he had expected, but the team's records actually dropped to the bottom. This was something that truly shocked him. He was at a loss towards the team. As the boss, he knew a lot of things, but there were also a lot of things he didn't know. His enmity towards Ye Xiu had ended when he kicked Ye Xiu out of the team, but he didn't think that Liu Hao would have an even deeper enmity than him towards Ye Xiu. Liu Hao chasing after Ye Xiu had affected his performance and led to a disastrous loss for Excellent Era. Afterwards, Liu Hao quickly adjusted, and the team gradually stabilized. But after Ye Xiu left, he didn't give up. He wanted to try again and created a huge storm in the 10th server. His existence caused no end to trouble for the clubs. He even caused a commotion amongst the pro players. If it was just Huang Xiaoshan or Wang Jixi running to the game to fight with Ye Xiu, it wouldn't make a difference. But Excellent Era's enmity towards Ye Xiu ran deep. As soon as there was a chance, Liu Hao wanted to fight and even brought Sun Xiang into the mess. Then he called over the entire main team. The first time, Liu Hao's condition had been affected. The next time, the entire team's condition had been affected. This season, Excellent Era hadn't been doing well in the first place. Now that their condition declined even further, their record plummeted even faster. Sun Xiang had trouble recovering from the blow. He was like a toothless old tiger who couldn't bring about any energy. At the end of the season, the team directly dropped into relegations, and the players panicked. Relegations was a catastrophe for any team. No one wanted to be on a sinking ship, so their morale completely died. Tao Xuan was unable to turn around the situation. In the end, he could only prepare for their relegations and trust that this crisis would pass. Getting relegated definitely wasn't within Tao Xuan's predictions. He wasn't happy at all about this result, and everything was because of Ye Xiu. If it wasn't for him, how could things have ended up like this? Lord Grimm, did you really think you could start over from zero? Tao Xuan sneered, seeing the changed name on QQ. That instant, he suddenly felt like participating in the Challenger League wasn't too bad. Even though their image would certainly take a hit, personally eliminating Ye Xiu would certainly be a sight to see. At this time, Tao Xuan finally saw the other side reply. Are you scared of me? The King's Avatar Chapter 623. Are you afraid of me? Tao Xuan felt the urge to jump out of the window, run across the street and slap his face until it bled. I'm afraid of you. Tao Xuan typed it out, but before clicking send, he wondered if his reply seemed too serious. He should be looking down on this question in contempt and express that Ye Xiu didn't even have the qualification to ask him such a thing. So maybe I shouldn't reply back. His mouse hovered over the send button. Tao Xuan hesitated for a long time. Do I reply or not? He finally realized how painful it must have been for enemies to talk trash with Ye Xiu. Just this single question made him furious. If he replied, he'd be angry. If he didn't reply, he'd still be angry. He could easily imagine how getting aggravated from this question could affect someone's performance. If a player hesitated like Tao Xuan had right now, the player would be dead. Look, he's not replying. He's scared. Across the street at Happy Internet Cafe, Ye Xiu told Wei Chen and the others looking at his chat window. Fortunately, it wasn't a voice chat, so Tao Xuan couldn't hear what he was saying. If not, he really might have run across the street and vented his rage. FCK off. He's probably shocked by your shamelessness, Wei Chen countered. Excellent era being scared of a brand new team. What a joke. We should always be confident in ourselves, Ye Xiu advised. FCK, then why are we being so nervous for? We should just fight with excellent era in round 1. You can go up alone and wipe them out by yourself. Go ahead, Wei Chen urged. They argued back and forth. On the other side, Tao Xuan finally replied. In the end, he erased his "I'm scared of you" message and typed, "Give me a reason to be scared of you." You still need a reason. Everyone in glory is afraid of me. It's common knowledge, Ye Xiu replied. SHT, I can't take it anymore. Everyone look at how despicable this guy is, Wei Chen shouted. Steamed Bun and Tang Ru had been playing glory, so they hadn't been reading the conversation taking place. Now Wei Chen called them over. Chen Yu had been watching too. When she saw the reply, she was already bashing her head against the wall. Maybe in the past, but now, Tao Xuan answered back using ellipses. Now, you should go to the game and interview people. Both the 10th server and the heavenly domain are fine, Ye Xiu replied. Showing off your skills in game, not bad, Tao Xuan remarked cynically. Honestly, he almost didn't believe he had said this. It wasn't like him, but as the owner of a powerful club, very few talked to him in this way. Today, Ye Xiu did it. Ye Xiu had brought someone of a higher status down to his level and was talking trash with him on QQ. What an incredible talent for taunting. The game is glory's foundation. Would you dare to close excellent dynasty? Ye Xiu asked back. If you'd like, I can arrange a position for you in excellent dynasty. Tao Xuan let go of everything. He rolled up his sleeves, ready to fight it out with Ye Xiu. No need. I recommend paying attention to excellent dynasty. Don't let it close down, Ye Xiu said. Because of you? Tao Xuan asked. Why don't you ask Chen Yehui? He'd be scared to death, Ye Xiu said. This time, Tao Xuan couldn't think of a reply. Ye Xiu looked as if he had definitive proof that what he was saying was correct, but Tao Xuan didn't know if it was the truth or not. He had never personally participated in any of these matters. It's like a debate, where one side raised a strong argument, while the other side couldn't answer and could only emphasize a previous point. Even though Ye Xiu didn't raise any strong argument, he still gave off that sort of feeling. His words were rooted in reality, while Tao Xuan's words were baseless. He didn't reply again. I win, Ye Xiu said. FCK, what did you come here for then? Wei Chen was fuming. He had watched them talk trash each other back and forth. Ye Xiu's original goal was to confirm that their team wouldn't encounter excellent era in the first round. He directly asked for confirmation, but after going back and forth at it for a long time, he still hadn't gotten an answer to the question. A great god and a great boss were bickering like little kids. It was so childish. There's no point talking any further. We'll talk on stage, Tao Xuan replied. Good, it looks like you haven't changed. Prove your words on the battlefield. Ye Xiu replied. Ha ha, I'd suggest lighting some incense. You'd better pray you don't meet us in the first round, Tao Xuan said. I'll be praying, Ye Xiu replied. At the same time, he sent an emoji of a panda burning incense. Ye Xiu's words suddenly changed from offensive to defensive. Tao Xuan saw the emoji of a panda burning incense, and after a short pause he answered, I'll see you on stage. I'll see you on stage. Ye Xiu replied and closed the chat window. Done, Wei Chen stared with wide eyes. Done. What's the result? We'll see each other on stage, Ye Xiu said. FCK, did you get an answer or not? Wei Chen said. He won't try to rig anything. Who will win and who will lose will be decided on stage. Ye Xiu said. You're sure? Wei Chen confirmed. Ye Xiu nodded his head. Why? Wei Chen didn't understand. It looked like the two of them had some enmity towards each other. I've known him for many years. Even though our goals changed, a few fundamental principles still haven't changed, Ye Xiu said. Why did it feel like even if they hadn't changed, he was about to change them out of anger after being mocked by you? Wei Chen said. Only someone as immoral as you would do something like that, Ye Xiu said. I really want to throw you out of the window. Wei Chen really wanted to bash his head against the wall. Ye Xiu had given him an answer with certainty, but after watching the conversation that had just taken place, he wasn't convinced that the messages were definitive. Wei Chen was still unsure. Then Ye Xiu turned around and said to him, Hurry up and burn some incense. What do you mean? Wei Chen stared blankly. Even if he doesn't rig the matchups, there is still a possibility for us to meet in the first round. If we don't burn incense, what do we do? Ye Xiu said. What's the seeking point of burning incense? Wei Chen cursed. Then what will work? Ye Xiu asked. Wei Chen was stumped. What else would work? Even if Excellent Era didn't personally rig it, it wasn't possible to completely eliminate the possibility of them meeting in the first round. If they actually won the lottery and got Excellent Era, they couldn't run away from it. Okay, let's hurry up and practice, Wei Chen said and went back to his seat. The practice room suddenly became quiet again. Wei Chen suddenly asked, Boss, if we go and rob those elite group leaders, will you still object? That isn't a good reason to do so, is it? Chen Yu was surprised by the sudden question but quickly replied back. Great. Everyone has their principles. How great, Wei Chen muttered. Someone as completely unscrupulous like you must feel deeply touched, right? Ye Xiu said. Wei Chen clicked his tongue in disdain. He grabbed his headphones and returned to the game. It's F-seeking time to start work. Today's the day that the dungeons refresh. Where's your energy? If you guys can't even stay in your positions and kill yourself like last time, I'll kick you out of the elite group and you'll never come back. Wei Chen roared. He began leading Samsara's elite group in tackling the dungeon. Wei Chen's work in Eternal Springs had been very fruitful. In reality, even the top elite groups of the club guilds could pass through the 7 great dungeons every time. They often wiped out after several bosses, but under Wei Chen's lead, their elite group's clear rate had improved greatly. Last week, the elite group had performed terribly. The dungeon had 10 bosses. On the 4th boss, so many had died that they could no longer continue, making Wei Chen extremely angry. Is he okay? Chen Guo walked over to Ye Xiu and whispered to him, Relax, don't worry about it. The good thing about old people is that they can take care of their own problems, Ye Xiu said with confidence. Oh, that's good. Chen Guo nodded her head. Then she pointed to Ye Xiu's screen. Someone messaged you. Hm. Ye Xiu clicked on the message. Oh, it's Concealed Light. Concealed Light had messaged Ye Xiu on QQ. Hey, what's up? Ye Xiu replied. I studied the stuff you sent me. I confirmed that many of things inside are highly likely through the calculations I made. I also corrected a few mistakes through backwards reasoning. There were a few parts of it that I wasn't too sure of. Later, I asked my professor, and based on the data and calculations made, I created a mathematical model for it with his guidance. I'll send it to you so that you can take a look at. Concealed Light messaged. Holy SHT, wait a minute. I pretty much don't understand anything that you have said this far. How did your professor get into this? Ye Xiu was sweating. There were a lot of things that I couldn't figure out, so I could only ask for help. Relax. My professor is Professor Zhang Yichun, Concealed Light said. How can I relax? Ye Xiu replied. Chen Guo felt proud. Amazing. A university professor is even helping us. University professor. The others were puzzled when they heard this. Yeah, concealed light asked Professor Zhang Yichun to help us study the data, Chen Guo exclaimed. Who? The others didn't have any reaction, but Tang Ru was astonished. Professor Zhang Yichun. Chen Guo said the name again, but she clearly didn't know who this person was either. You guys don't know who he is. Tang Ru looked at them helplessly. Who is he? The others asked in unison. He's a world-famous mathematician and a member of the National Academy of the Sciences. He's made several breakthroughs in several fields of mathematics. What type of student is concealed light that he'd be personally taught by such a world-class mathematician? Tang Ru asked as she walked over. She wanted to see their conversation too. The King's Avatar Chapter 624, Scientist. Wei Chen sounded as if he were mumbling to himself. It was clear that his brain couldn't digest the fact that he would ever have anything to do with these types of people in his life. Are you stupid? He's a mathematician. Ye Xiu looked down on him. FCK, isn't that the same thing? Wei Chen yelled. Apart from steamed bun, everyone else found it difficult to breathe after Tang Ru told them about Zhang Yichuan's identity and status. Concealed light, you're actually the student of such a math god. What sort of background do you have? Ye Xiu asked him Tang Ru's question. What's the point in asking him about it? Do you even know anything about universities? Wei Chen asked Ye Xiu. Even if one has never eaten a pig before, that doesn't mean one has never seen one running around. Ye Xiu said. You've seen a pig running around a university, Wei Chen said. It's impossible to talk with uncultured people like you, Ye Xiu said. At this moment, Concealed Light replied back on QQ. He didn't have any special background, but he was incredible. He had received countless awards from participating in math competitions as a teen. He was a specially enrolled math student who had been accepted into the university without needing to take any of the required examinations at the age of 17. Although he was only a second year, that was just a title. With the knowledge that Concealed Light possessed, he had already learned everything that could be learned in a normal math undergraduate student's curriculum. He was getting ready to apply as a recommended graduate student next year. He told them that, if possible, he would like to finish his master's and PhD at the same time. Ambitious. Ye Xiu didn't really know what else to say. However, Concealed Light didn't think too much of himself. Along the way, he would often hear about people getting their PhDs at the age of 20, people being employed as professors in all kinds of famous universities at the age of 24, people receiving all kinds of medals and achievements before the age of 30, people with IQs over 200. Compared to those inhuman geniuses, Concealed Light lamented in QQ. No, I'm still far off. The people before the computer looked at one another with consternation and didn't know what to say. Wouldn't it be a loss to our country if we let a talent like him get into gaming? Even Wei Chen felt like a sinner. There's a lot of pressure. Ye Xiu agreed. When you asked your mentor for help, did he say anything? Ye Xiu asked. According to conventional thinking, instead of studying properly, you play games and even ask your teacher for help with your issues about the game. Aren't you asking to be whipped? Professor Zhang, he said the problem was pretty interesting. Concealed Light replied. This problem was pretty interesting. Ye Xiu and the people wanted to kneel out of respect. Even though they didn't understand any of what was being talked about with their education levels, they at least knew that it had to do with the logic or rules involved in the game's data. However, according to a mathematician from the National Academy of Sciences, this was just another problem. At least he said the problem was pretty interesting. It meant that glory wasn't a drag. Glory really had some depth to it. However, designers, engineers, programmers of glory, apologies, but your problem has been solved. I'll send it over for you guys to have a look at, Concealed Light said as he sent the document over. Ye Xiu turned serious when he opened the file. It wouldn't be right to categorize what they were about to do as hacking. This really wasn't hacking, it was just exposing the core of glory. However, a problem soon came about. Ye Xiu and Wei Chen were top experts in calculating the consumption of a character's HP or MP, calculating the cooldown of a skill, attack range, positioning, movement speed, jump height, etc. But when the game was unraveled to its roots, the two could only stare at each other blankly. Ahem. Ye Xiu coughed. This, Tang Ru also mumbled. Chem. Everyone immediately gazed at her with hope. This is definitely not something we can understand, Tang Ru said. I agree, Ye Xiu said. Why don't we buy some books? Wei Chen said. Math books, Ye Xiu asked. What else? Language books. Wei Chen was disdainful towards Ye Xiu's stupid question. You should go buy some books on morals, Ye Xiu said while he searched for concealed light on QQ. Concealed light, do you think that we can interpret this? You don't understand anything, Concealed Light asked. This kid's not laughing at us right now, is he? Ye Xiu turned around to ask the people behind him. You think everyone is like you, Chen Guo refuted. Did he really think that everyone was a natural at taunting like him? I don't understand it, not even a little bit. Ye Xiu replied to Concealed Light. Then what should we do? Concealed Light asked. Use the same language that you use for your guides and describe this information to us, Ye Xiu said. Oh, I understand what you mean, Concealed Light replied. Then you wouldn't need to bother your teacher again with this, right? Ye Xiu asked. No need, he's never played Glory before, so he wouldn't know, Concealed Light replied. Sorry for the trouble, Ye Xiu said. Okay, wait for my good news, Concealed Light said. Also, Ye Xiu hurriedly called for Concealed Light. The Pro League for this season is going to be ending soon. As for us, we plan on participating in the Challenger League in September. Would that be all right with you? Would it be too busy for you or distract you from your studies? No, I'm not busy. I have plenty of time. September is it? I understand, Concealed Light said. Then off you go. Concealed Light's picture dimmed. Ye Xiu heard sighs of relief sound out from behind him. Concealed Light saw himself as someone far off, but in the eyes of everyone else, he was an extraordinary person, needless to mention his incredible teacher. Having him play Glory instantly made everyone feel like their burden had become even heavier. Go back to your seats. Why are you all still standing around for? Ye Xiu turned around and shooed away the 3 dazed people behind him. Look at how calm Steamed Bun was. At first, he joined in to see why there was a crowd, but after opening the things that Concealed Light sent over, everyone felt ashamed for not understanding a thing, except for Steamed Bun, who said, "What's this?" and returned to his seat to continue playing. Everyone returned to their seats. No one spoke in the practice room, and only the tapping of the keyboard and mouse could be heard. Apart from Steamed Bun, everyone else was robotic and stiff. Evidently, everyone was still digesting the news and couldn't calm down at that moment. Ye Xiu and the others didn't understand any of it. On the other hand, the hardest part for Concealed Light had been coming up with a model. However, understanding it and explaining it in simpler words wasn't a problem for him. Not long afterwards, Concealed Light returned to QQ and messaged Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu didn't make it public to prevent everyone else from making a big fuss over nothing. Concealed Light sent some things over while saying, "Does this make more sense?" Ye Xiu received it and read it. The familiar Concealed Light had returned. It was like one of Concealed Light's old guides, long-winded and down to the finest detail, but this time, Ye Xiu needed instructions like this, so he immediately gave out a series of loud praises. Then I'll keep going. Concealed Light spoke as he focused again. Come look at this. Ye Xiu immediately called Wei Chen over. After all, Wei Chen was the researcher for this project. He had a strong impression and understanding of the data he had pulled. When he came over to see Concealed Light's guide, he couldn't help but to feel curious about it. It turned out that everything Wei Chen had described in the draft was turned into data by Concealed Light. Most importantly, All the logical relationships between the triggering requirements were listed out clearly. Wei Chen originally had things like this, but that was through his experience and intuition. After being sorted out by concealed light, it had become facts. You go try it. Wei Chen couldn't wait to know the results. Everyone will try it. Ye Xiu spoke and called steamed bun and tang ru over. The parts concealed light had just sorted were coincidentally contents for quests in the normal servers. There were a lot of quests in Glory. If it was just for gaining experience to level up, then there were too many quests to finish. Glory wasn't just a game anymore either. The experienced players had found the most optimal ways to level up. The quests were picked out logically, so almost everyone did the same quests. The situation in the new servers were better. After all, not everyone would go check a guide before they played the game. Some players liked to find their own way and find their own quests to do because there was plenty of content in the game. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun weren't enthusiastic about quests. Tang Ru simply had no interest in the quests at all. If not for the rewards from quests such as stat or skill points, she wouldn't have done any quests. As for Steamed Bun, he did whatever he wanted and lacked planning. He might be clearing monsters, but when you call out Steamed Bun, come for a quest, he would immediately come. Or perhaps he was on such a quest, and when you called out Steamed Bun, come join for a dungeon, he would instantly drop his quest for the dungeon. The data that Wei Chen had obtained was important in creating a character. Skill points decided the level of a skill, which greatly influenced a character's strength in battle. So when Wei Chen investigated on such a thing, Ye Xiu didn't care whether it was useful or not. He first checked what the quests were. The required quests were removed. After all, these quests weren't daily quests. It couldn't be done again if it had already been completed. Otherwise, Wei Chen didn't need to investigate so much. He could just research one quest and keep on repeating it. Besides, if skill points were awarded just by completing quests repeatedly, then it wouldn't be an issue in the first place. With this many players, there wouldn't be any more secrets that hadn't been found for repeatable quests. But now, after passing through the hands of concealed light, this material had become more realistic and accurate. They had really reached the pinnacle by investigating the game to this point. To surpass this, one would have to directly alter the game, and that would be hacking the King's Avatar Chapter 625. The three aspiring pro players Tang Ru, Steamed Bun, and Ye Xiu still didn't have max-leveled characters. Tang Ru's Soft Mist was the highest level among them at level 69. She would be considered a high-level player in the 10th server, but she couldn't compare to the club guilds, who leveled their characters 24/7. The first batch of max-leveled characters in the 10th server appeared at the start of April. Usually, it wouldn't be until mid-April when the first max-leveled characters appeared in a new server. The reason that the 10th server had their first batch of characters come out before then was because of the huge exp rewards from the Christmas event. Relying on the advantage gained from the Christmas event, the first batch of characters reached level 70 ahead of schedule. Afterwards, the club guilds worked hard at leveling their characters, keeping up the same leveling speed as usual. Tang Ru played a lot more compared to the vast majority of players, but she could only play 2/3 of what the club guilds could play with their 24/7 leveling. In the end, she was left further and further behind. It was only until today that she made it to the final step before level 70. Steamed Bun Invasion was level 68. He was only one level behind Soft Mist, but in reality, he hadn't been able to close the distance that had been made during the Christmas event. The amount of experience needed for a level 60 character was very different compared to the amount of experience needed for a level 30 character. Even though it was only a one-level difference, the experience disparity was huge. It would take steamed bun invasion several days more than soft mist to reach level 70. In comparison, Ye Xiu's Lord Grim had a very difficult time leveling in the heavenly domain. The advantage he had established during the Christmas event had quickly been whittled away by steamed bun invasion. But after the short break at level 55, Lord Grim's leveling speed soared. First of all, Ye Xiu was much more skilled than steamed bun invasion. Secondly, the heavenly domain was much more generous with rewarding experience, so leveling there was naturally faster than in the normal servers. Thus, because of the Christmas event, Lord Grim had pulled a distance away from steamed bun invasion, who eventually caught up and surpassed him. Later, he started catching up to steamed bun invasion. Currently, Lord Grim was level 66, 2 levels behind steamed bun invasion. Their level difference was mostly because of the time that Ye Xiu had spent on unrivaled super hottie. During that time, Lord Grim hadn't been leveling. In truth, apart from Lord Grim, the levels of their characters had never been an issue. Lord Grim was an unspecialized, and a max-leveled unspecialized couldn't be bought. At best, he would be able to get a level 50 account. As for Tang Ru and Steamed Bun, there were only advantages and no disadvantages to have them personally level their characters to max because they were still new to the game. At present, things couldn't be better having these clean accounts with Wei Chen's skill book guide. If Chen Guo's chasing haze came, she might have already done some of these quests. Even if she knew how to get better rewards from these quests, she would no longer have the chance to get them. When Ye Xiu gave the small portion that Concealed Light had interpreted so far to Tang Ru and Steamed Bun, Chen Guo was naturally very happy to get a copy of her own too. Afterwards, she got on her chasing haze and returned to the normal server to start following the guide. Ye Xiu wasn't in a hurry though. He logged out of his game and ran over to Steamed Bun's side. Steamed Bun was staring at the document given to him with his brows furrowed. After a while, he finally noticed that Ye Xiu was next to him. "It's so complicated," Steamed Bun said. "It just has a lot of words. It's really not that complicated." Ye Xiu said. "Concealed Light talks too much nonsense," Steamed Bun sighed. He probably didn't care that Concealed Light was a math genius, who would very likely be getting his PhD in math at a very young age. He still regarded him as a little kid. "Go try it out," Ye Xiu said. "I was just about to go." Steamed Bun had his character head to the location of the first quest in the guide. Ye Xiu didn't walk away. He continued to watch Steamed Bun. It was very wise for Ye Xiu to stay with Steamed Bun. Not long after accepting the quest, he had begun deviating from the guide. "Where are you going?" Ye Xiu didn't realize it at first. He thought that Steamed Bun had gotten lost, so he asked. "HM, aren't we going to fight Frank?" Steamed Bun said. "You're going to duel him already. There's 2 steps in between that you haven't done yet," Ye Xiu said. "Really?" Steamed Bun went back to the guide, and after reading for a long time, "Oops, I skipped a line." "You skipped 3 lines," Ye Xiu said. "There are too many words." Steamed Bun's defense was reasonable. After thinking about it for a bit, Ye Xiu felt that it really was an issue and not just an excuse. Steamed Bun read those 3 lines again very carefully and then asked excitedly, "What happens if I don't do these in order and just go and duel Frank?" "We can try it next time. For now, let's follow the guide." Ye Xiu lied. At this point, he was too afraid to let Steamed Bun do anything on his own right now. Sure enough, having Steamed Bun do such a precise and mechanical task was very suspenseful. Steamed Bun's thought process far surpassed what an ordinary person could think of. "Okay." Steamed Bun listened to Ye Xiu's suggestion and followed the guide. "How's it going?" Wei Chen was clearly very concerned with the results. He put down his work and headed over to watch. Ye Xiu didn't say anything. He continued to pay attention to each and every one of Steamed Bun's movements. Wei Chen went over to Tang Ru's side to watch. Almost there. It was almost the last step when there would be a chance for a skill book to drop, Wei Chen started getting anxious. Even Tang Ru, who had only played Glory for 5 months, knew the value of skill books. After all, she played on her character every day and understood the importance of skills. She had a good understanding of an extra level in a skill could do. Now that they had reached the final step, Tang Ru paused for a bit before completing it. The rewards came out. Tang Ru and Wei Chen were both disappointed. The skill book that they had hoped for didn't come out. "Did we make a mistake?" Wei Chen said. "Be patient. It was never guaranteed that a skill book would drop, right? The guide that Concealed Light had created was based on the framework that you had provided. No, even if we follow it, luck is still needed. Concealed Light never said it was guaranteed. He said that it was better than your original method by 17.481%. In the end, the probability of one dropping is still only 34.314%. It's not that high, so it's normal that it didn't drop," Ye Xiu said. "Are there any guaranteed drops that we can try?" Wei Chen was very anxious. In reality, he was still worried about Excellent Era getting relegated. Wei Chen wasn't like Tang Ru or Steamed Bun. They were still new and didn't understand the vast difference between them and Excellent Era. On the other hand, Wei Chen understood it well and couldn't relax. He was very stressed out right now. "There aren't any in the guide so far. There might be later. SHH, we're almost there too," Ye Xiu said. Under Ye Xiu's supervision, Steamed Bun was about to reach the final step too. Here, Steamed Bun showed his cool-headedness. He had his character jog over and turn in the quest. Wei Chen couldn't even look. "Did it drop?" When Wei Chen turned back, he hastily asked. "No," Ye Xiu shook his head in disappointment. "So unlucky." Wei Chen was gloomy. "Don't panic, there are more chances." "No," Ye Xiu said, "but we'll never be able to get this 20-point skill book again." Wei Chen shook his head. "Old Wei," Ye Xiu shouted. "What?" Wei Chen was still depressed. "It seems like you really need to go across the street and break a few of Excellent Era's windows to calm down," Ye Xiu said. He had told Chen Guo that she didn't need to be worried about Wei Chen because he would be able to adjust himself. But Wei Chen didn't act like he had expected. Wei Chen was constantly stressed and very unlike what an experienced player should be like. These past few years of reclusion had stifled Wei Chen. Suddenly, he had been presented with an ambitious goal and couldn't control his excitement. But the more passionate he was about it, the more worried he became. This type of state of mind would negatively affect his performance. "I'll go smoke a cigarette." Wei Chen didn't retort. He took out a cigarette and went outside to smoke. Even he knew that his current behavior was abnormal. However, something like emotions couldn't be controlled so easily. "Little Tang, keep going. Help me watch Steamed Bun too," Ye Xiu said. "I'll help." Chen Guo got up and prepared to be like Steamed Bun's nanny for doing quests. Steamed Bun really needed someone to take care of him for these quests. Ye Xiu nodded his head and went out the door. He saw Wei Chen standing at the window, smoking and staring blankly out the window. Ye Xiu walked up and looked outside too. Excellent Era's logo stood out clearly. It was probably incomparably unsightly in Wei Chen's eyes. "What do? I can't help but be nervous," Wei Chen said. "You're too worried," Ye Xiu said. "How could I not be worried? That's Excellent Era," Wei Chen said. "Yeah, it's just Excellent Era. You've never met them," Ye Xiu said. "I've met them, and that was during Excellent Era's golden era, but I'm also much worse compared to the me in the past," Wei Chen said. "What about you now? You have strengths now that you didn't have before," Ye Xiu said. "Age," Wei Chen laughed mockingly. "That's just one," Ye Xiu said. "Oh, there's more." Wei Chen was surprised. He thought Ye Xiu would console him by telling him about one of his experiences. "The person who crushed you in the past is now your teammate," Ye Xiu said. Wei Chen turned his head to look at Ye Xiu and then continued to look out the window. "That's what I'm worried about. I've never viewed Excellent Era like this before." Ye Xiu looked out the window. "In what way?" "Viewed them as opponents that I have to defeat." Ye Xiu said the king's Avatar Chapter 626 opponents that must be defeated. When Ye Xiu said these words, he didn't grind his teeth or give a determined look. He seemed as calm as ever. Yes, they must be defeated. Wei Chen followed, but he wasn't calm at all. He said these words fiercely and crushed his cigarette on the window sill. It doesn't matter what type of tricks Excellent Era uses. We have to beat them regardless. Wei Chen might have been talking to himself. He encouraged himself to not be scared of anything anymore. At that moment, the door to the practice room suddenly opened. Chen Guo rushed out excitedly and yelled, "It dropped! It dropped!" Oh, that quickly? Ye Xiu and Wei Chen were pleasantly surprised. Yeah, the quest this time wasn't as long. The two of them quickly finished it. Chen Guo said. Who got it? Ye Xiu asked. Both of them, Chen Guo said. FCK, that punk is really amazing, Wei Chen said as he rushed into the practice room. Ye Xiu looked back at Excellent Era and sucked in a deep breath before gently extinguishing his cigarette. When he walked back into the practice room, the atmosphere was naturally joyful. The second quest in the guide was fairly short, so the results soon came out. Both Tang Ru and Steamed Bun had obtained a 25-point skill book. Let me see, let me see. Ye Xiu hastily walked over. What's there to see? They already used them, Chen Guo said. I wonder how many people would be jealous if they knew that they got a skill book this easily, Ye Xiu sighed. Afterwards, he didn't forget to ask Chen Guo, how's it going on your end? Chen Guo's face turned ugly. I've already completed these quests before. That's too bad, but it doesn't matter. There will always be more chances later. There will also be some quests that you haven't done yet too. Ye Xiu encouraged her. I hope so, Chen Guo said. Ye Xiu then asked Wei Chen, I remember that you said the accounts in your group all had around 4,700 skill points, right? Pretty much, Wei Chen answered. The methods that you used weren't as good as the ones that Concealed Light came up with, Ye Xiu said. But getting drops by chance is never definite, Wei Chen said. That's true. Have you ever thought of calculating how many possible skill points that could be obtained if everything went your way? Ye Xiu asked. Of course. 1650 skill points. Wei Chen immediately answered. This number included his many years of work and studying, and he was very proud of it. Oh, and your friends have around 4,700 skill points total. The base number of skill points is 4,000, so you got around 700 skill points through these skill books. If that's the case, then with your original method, your probability of getting a skill book was around 50%. Ye Xiu said. Hey, how come everything that comes out of your mouth is so shallow? 4,700 points is still an incredible result, okay? Apart from pro player accounts, do you know how many people in the game have over 4,700 skill points? With the amount of skill points that our characters have, our characters are worth a lot, Wei Chen said. Then hurry up and sell them. In any case, you guys are blacklisted by the big guilds anyways. Ye Xiu said. It's been so long. We fell from their sights a long time ago, Wei Chen said. This was because of a boss fight. Wei Chen had led his friends and caused chaos amongst the top guilds. Because of this, the top guilds chased after them like crazy. In the end, Ye Xiu had given them the accounts that he had won in a bet, allowing them to continue playing. A long time had already passed since then. It was more than long enough for guilds to forget about them, let alone the top guilds. These club guilds were very busy. How could any of them have the time to keep chasing down a small team of players? These club guilds were massive. Every day, their main guild and branch guilds had tons of problems to deal with. If every single issue was never let go of, the guilds would go crazy. As a result, once Wei Chen's group escaped after provoking the top guilds kept one eye open while keeping the other closed. They might run into each other. If they remember, then they might kill them in the passing, but they definitely wouldn't send a specialized group tasked with hunting them down. Are you still planning on using that warlock? Ye Xiu asked. The account's not bad, Wei Chen said. Apart from skill points, what's the difference between accounts? Ye Xiu said. Their names are different, Steamed Bun answered. Their appearances are different too, Chen Yu added. She placed a lot of importance on appearances. Okay. Ye Xiu nodded his head. He didn't bother arguing because he knew that Wei Chen didn't care about these areas. He. Wei Chen laughed evilly. How many skill points does your account have? Ye Xiu suddenly seemed to have realized something. Which character in Glory has the highest number of skill points? Wei Chen suddenly asked. Han Wenking's Desert Smoke, 4880 skill points. Ye Xiu said. He seemed to know where Wei Chen was heading with his words. Correct. Desert Smoke has 40 more points than your One Autumn Leaf, right? Wei Chen didn't hurry. Right, how many skill points does your character have? Ye Xiu asked. Haha, not much. It only has 4920 skill points, that's all. It has 40 more points than Desert Smoke, 80 more points than One Autumn Leaf, 90 more points than Swixar, so my Windward Formation is in fact the character with the most skill points in Glory, Wei Chen said delightedly. Your luck is pretty good. Ye Xiu sighed. Wei Chen's warlock must have relied on his method to get all of these skill points. After all, as long as he had luck on his side, even if his method wasn't as good, he would still be able to get a lot of extra skill points. As a result, while the other characters had around 4,700 skill points, he was lucky and got 4,920 skill points. Wei Chen's methods could obtain a total of 1,650 points. If one had insane luck, then one could even obtain the maximum amount of skill points in Glory and have extra left over. But there's still 80 points of room to improve. You're willing to give those up? Ye Xiu asked. You guys try first. I'll wait and see before I do anything, Wei Chen calmly said. Ye Xiu didn't urge him. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun continued to quest. Steamed Bun was being supervised by Chen Guo, so Ye Xiu also ran over to try it out for himself. Lord Grimm's return to the 10th server immediately spread around in happy. The top guilds were naturally terrified. But after seeing his level and knowing that Lord Grimm wasn't level 70 yet, they relaxed slightly. Last month, the top guilds already had level 70 guilds, so they currently held the records for the level 70 dungeons. Even if the records for the dungeons below level 70 were crushed, the player base was no longer focusing on them, so the top guilds could tolerate it. However, they then thought of how Lord Grimm had casually snatched a wild boss last time he came. This loss was even worse than losing a dungeon record. The top guilds didn't dare be negligent and informed all of their players. If you ever see Lord Grimm, report his actions to the guild. After nearly half a year, the club guilds in the 10th server had expanded greatly. Lord Grimm's existence during the initial stages had suppressed them significantly. All of them had suffered at one point. None of them were able to establish their power amongst the new player base until Lord Grimm left to the heavenly domain. Only then could the club guilds flip over and start singing. From then on, they could compete without having anyone step all over them. The more time passed, the weaker the influence Lord Grimm had in the 10th server. The top guilds expanded like crazy. As the players played Glory, they began paying attention to the pro scene and had their own favorite team and pro players. Thus, the advantage that the club guilds possessed finally appeared. They could attract their fans to join. They didn't need any reason other than their name. But at the same time, because of this reason, the performance of the team in the Pro Alliance would directly affect their respective guilds' development, especially among the popular mass. The new players had only just begun paying attention to the pro scene, so they didn't have many feelings for the past glory of the current teams. What they looked at was their current strength at the moment. Through this reason, Samsara developed rapidly in the 10th server just like their team this season. Many of the new players started watching the Pro Alliance during the later half of the season, which just happened to be when Samsara began dominating the scene after the all-star competition. Samsara shot up the rankings, and their fans increased alongside the team's growth. Samsara's guild growth expanded swiftly, completely suppressing Blue Brook Guild, Herb Garden, and Tyrannical Ambition. The most tragic club guilds was naturally Excellent Dynasty. When the new players started paying attention to the Pro Alliance, Excellent Era stayed at the bottom until they were beautifully relegated. If someone knew like Excellent Era for getting relegated, then that person would be a very strange person. No one in the 10th server had many feelings for Excellent Dynasty. Ye Xiu had originally planned on making huge movements this season alongside the club. He made preparations for the guild to shine in the 10th server. At the very beginning, he had sent more experts to help pioneer in the new server than the other guilds. He had wanted to use the opportunity while the new players didn't know much about glory to show their guild's strength in order to attract their attention and establish a solid base. How could he have known that at this stage, he would run into Ye Xiu starting over again in the 10th server? It didn't matter that he had more experts. Ye Xiu was a god. Ye Xiu had even pulled over Liu Hao to help, but didn't he also get crushed? His original plan had been destroyed by Ye Xiu. By the time Ye Xiu stepped into the heavenly domain with Lord Grimm, the 10th server players now had a certain understanding of glory and had begun paying attention to the pro scene. With Team Excellent Era's disgusting performances, when Guild Excellent Dynasty was recruiting players to join, they hated how they couldn't hide their guild's name. Even if the players didn't know that Guild Excellent Dynasty and Team Excellent Era were related, the other club guilds like Tyrannical Ambition, Blue Brook Guild, Herb Garden would help spread this type of common knowledge to the player base. Excellent Dynasties, starred in the 10th server, had been an utter disaster from start to finish. The King's Avatar Chapter 627. The top guilds prepared themselves for Lord Grimm's return to the 10th server. Who knew what evil this god was planning on committing this time? All of the guilds from top to bottom were assigned to monitoring him. They swore that they wouldn't stop until they figured out what his intentions were for returning this time. In reality, Ye Xiu was just here to do some quests. Getting involved with the guilds never even crossed his mind. When he arrived back in the 10th server, he still greeted everyone in guild happy though. Without someone as mighty as Ye Xiu watching over them, Happy naturally had no way of contesting the various club guilds, especially as the influence of the pro teams pervaded their way through the server. In fact, no player guild could compete against these club guilds. Right now, Happy was developing like a normal guild. People came and left. Chen Yu still managed the guild. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun could only provide their strength. For the guild affairs, the person who helped Chen Yu the most was the player Horse Shooter, who had joined because he had been a fan of Suma Cheng. The other player who joined alongside Horse Shooter was Thousand Creations. Even though he was also an experienced player that had been in a top guild before, he was pretty much a lone wolf. He couldn't be relied on for matters regarding the guild. In the end, he was the same as Tang Ru and Steamed Bun, and could provide some strength when needed. These four players were the highest level players in Happy. They couldn't compare to the crazy power leveling of the club guilds, but amongst the player guilds, their levels were still considered very high. From this perspective, Happy couldn't compare to the club guilds, but it was still much more powerful than the other regular player guilds. At the very least, they had a fairly robust guild storage system. Seeing the guild storage system, Ye Xiu thought of Blue River. He asked Chen Yu about him and found out that Blue River hadn't logged on in a long time. His Smurfs level had stopped there. When Ye Xiu checked his friends list, of the people he had interacted with, nearly all of his enemies and none of his friends were online. Ye Xiu didn't greet them. He just chatted with his guild members in the guild chat while having his Lord Grim head over to the quest locations. Steamed Bun obviously participated in the guild chat. He said even more than Ye Xiu did, boasting wildly about him. Steamed Bun talked about Ye Xiu as if he were an all-powerful entity, making Ye Xiu feel embarrassed to say anything in the chat anymore. Steamed Bun didn't stop and began talking about their team. Returning to the pro scene and winning the championships really was Ye Xiu's goal, but the problem was that Steamed Bun was brainlessly talking without any basis for it. Very few players in Happy were noobs who had just started playing Glory. So when the guild heard Steamed Bun's words, who would believe him? However, Steamed Bun was quite popular and Happy, and many of them understood his personality, so quite a few of them played along. However, Steamed Bun was being serious. As a result, anyone who saw Happy's guild chat would see it as absolutely ridiculous, and that Happy was bragging and exaggerating about their own abilities. The club guilds had spies inside Happy. It was just that without Lord Grim, it wasn't any different from a normal player guild, so they didn't make trouble for Happy. The various top guilds were busy competing against each other and didn't have any plans on picking a fight with Happy. After a while, many of the spies stopped logging in, but now that Lord Grim had returned, the circumstances had vastly changed. All sorts of dead accounts suddenly popped up out of nowhere, observing Lord Grim's activities in the guild at the same time. The players spread out around the leveling areas in the 10th server and constantly reported Lord Grim's movements to their guilds. Ye Xiu wasn't thinking about any of this. He just went to the quest location, accepted the quest, and then started following the guide. He's doing quests, the players monitoring Lord Grim reported to their guilds. What quest is he running? The higher-ups asked one after another. It seems to be Ambitious Frank, the reporting players guessed. Ambitious Frank. Some of the guild leaders who heard this quest's name knew of it while some didn't. For them, if it wasn't a quest in a quest chain that helped them level up quicker, they wouldn't touch it. They might have some impression of this quest, but they didn't know why they had an impression. As a result, everyone looked up the quest online. They browsed through numerous related pages to see if there was anything special about this quest. Page after page after page. The links on these pages all explained the quest and how to complete it. It was a very normal quest. There weren't any secrets involved. Impossible. It couldn't be so simple. The guilds affirmed. Their analysis wasn't wrong. Ye Xiu obviously had a very good reason for returning to the normal server to do quests. However, this reason wasn't something others could think of. Keep monitoring him, the guilds ordered as they continued to search for any mysteries to this quest. During this time, Ye Xiu smoothly completed the quests. Fighting was troublesome though because the equipment that he had included in the upgrades of Myriad Manifestations umbrella had been from the heavenly domain, so he couldn't bring it back into the normal server. The naked Lord Grim grabbed some equipment from the guild storage. Ye Xiu was accustomed to using the Myriad Manifestations umbrella, so now that he had switched to a different weapon, it didn't feel comfortable to use. The guilds were still trying to figure out this quest's mystery when Ye Xiu finished the last part of the quest. The quest rewards dropped. Ye Xiu checked the rewards and laughed out loud. I got one. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun hadn't gotten anything from this quest, but Ye Xiu got the 20-point skill book. This quest had a 34.314% chance of dropping one. For a skill book, this was already an extremely high probability. It had been 10 years since Glory came out, and there still hadn't been a single character with a max set of 5,000 skill points. One could easily imagine how difficult it was to get skill books. After many years of research, Wei Chen was able to get a batch of characters with around 4,700 skill points. But with Ye Xiu's understanding of Wei Chen, he knew that, When he said around 4,700 skill points, there were definitely fewer accounts with more than 4,700 skill points than accounts with less than 4,700 skill points. It might have just been him having crazy luck to get 4,920 skill points, while the others might all be below 4,700 skill points. If those were the results, it wasn't too special in glory. If someone really wanted an account with 4,700 skill points, it could still be bought with money. But after Concealed Light and his professor cleared up Wei Chen's efforts, the probability of skill books dropping were even higher now. Even though Concealed Light didn't say exactly how much the probability went up, with the part that they have right now, it would definitely be higher than Wei Chen's original method, not lower. A bunch of characters at that level would truly be the best, even in the pro scene. Let alone the limit of 5,000 skill points. Anything above 4,900 skill points was enough to make all of the god characters kneel. There were quite a few characters in the pro scene with 4,800 to 4,900 skill points, but there weren't any with over 4,900 skill points. Currently, building characters with high skill points could only be found through luck, but for Ye Xiu's group, through the years of effort from Wei Chen and analysis from extremely intelligent people like Concealed Light and his professor, they suddenly came up with an assembly line. If they manufactured a ton of high skill point characters, the account market in Glory would take a huge hit. The value of an account was mainly based on its class, equipment, and skill points. The difference between different classes wasn't much and equipment could always be bought, but skill points were different. If you had them, you had them. If you didn't have them, you didn't have them. If these high skill point characters were poured into the market, they would be of the utmost priority amongst buyers. As for other accounts, if they didn't have equipment that added skill points, they wouldn't be able to sell. Even if they had the right equipment, they might as well take off the equipment and buy a more powerful account. Wei Chen's efforts weren't just for fun, nor were they just to strengthen his character. He had thought of all of these issues before. However, his results weren't too stable. Accounts with 4,700 skill points weren't bad for accounts that had been accumulating skill points for 10 years, but it wasn't anything too amazing. As a result, he didn't immediately sell those accounts to make money. He wanted to find a more steady assembly line to increase the amount of skill points. And now it had become a reality. The original goal was to solve the problem of their team's weak characters, but now couldn't they also make some money in the passing? Seeing how Tang Ru steamed Bun and Ye Xiu continued to easily get skill books, Wei Chen offered this suggestion. Chen Guo was startled. She had been excited at how their team would have a bunch of powerful characters. She hadn't thought of making money by using such a method, but she was an experienced player after all. When Wei Chen made the suggestion, Chen Guo immediately understood the opportunity. Not only are they extremely valuable, have you ever seen such an account on the market? If one actually came out, there would definitely be a huge bidding war. Of course, as the number of these accounts increase, the price will certainly lower, but don't forget that we have a complete monopoly over them. The market would be completely controlled by us. Wei Chen had clearly thought of doing this before and said a whole bunch of stuff. In your dreams. The game company wouldn't let that happen. I feel like they'll quickly figure out how these characters came about. Then all they need to do is make some revisions to the code and our method will become useless. Ye Xiu said, "You're right. That's why I haven't done it yet. I was waiting until this method worked well so our profits would be maximized. That day has finally arrived." Wei Chen grasped his fists. "Then let me ask you, are you planning on creating a team or creating accounts to sell?" Ye Xiu asked the King's Avatar Chapter 628. That's a difficult question. Wei Chen felt a bit awkward. In truth, selling accounts with high skill points had been his plan all along. Joining a team and returning to the pro scene was something that he had never expected to do, so when Ye Xiu suddenly asked him this question, Wei Chen had a hard time answering it. "What I'm saying is that we should do both," Wei Chen expressed. "You're so old already. Are you sure you can do it?" Ye Xiu asked. "Earning money is never easy," Wei Chen said. "But right now, we're at a very important preparation stage. With an opponent like Excellent Era facing us in the near future, are you sure you have time to do both?" Ye Xiu asked. Wei Chen didn't say anything for a while. "How about we let it go for now? It seems like to me that you need to be clear about this. Your account business would require a certain amount of time to start up. First, you'd need to find a batch of suitable accounts. If you directly buy a max-leveled account, you don't know which quests they've done completed. You would need to ask the sellers for more details and filter out the unsuitable characters. That would be too time-consuming, and you don't even know if you can find characters that suit your needs. If it's finding suitable accounts, let's say we look for a studio to power-level new accounts for us. In the old servers, it would only take 3 months or so to level them from 0 to 70 at the fastest. For a studio, the speed and price are dependent. If you require the fastest leveling speed, the initial cost would be much higher. There's no need to be in such a rush, Wei Chen said. You're not in a rush. Don't forget that the Challenger League starts in September. Even though skill points can't directly be checked through a character's profile page, by analyzing the equipment and strength of the skills, it isn't difficult to estimate the number of skill points that a character has. The greater the attention our team receives, the more likely the fact that our characters have high skill points will be revealed. When the secret gets exposed, there will certainly be a huge reaction to it. All the company needs to do is look up our characters and they'll know that we've completely figured out how to earn skill books by following a certain sequence of steps. If that happened, wouldn't it be too late? Ye Xiu said. Wei Chen paused. Only now did he realize that his account business would conflict with the team's priorities. 3 months was the shortest amount of time possible to get suitable accounts. Even after they got the accounts, they would still need to do a bunch of quests to earn those skill points. These quests required a person to run them. The way to do these quests also had to stay a secret too, so they obviously couldn't have someone else farm for them. One more thing. If you want to buy suitable accounts, you can search for a studio and ask for however many you'd like. However, these accounts have special requirements and need to be leveled up at the time of the order. How many accounts are you planning on selling? 1,000. There isn't a studio out there that has the type of manpower to level 1,000 accounts in 3 months. Leveling in Glory requires manually doing it. Leveling an account to 70 in 3 months requires 24/7 non-stop playing. One character would need at least 2 players. How many studios do you know that have 2,000 workers? Ye Xiu asked. Oh right, 3 months is the time it takes to level up an account from 0 to 70 using the fastest method. With your special requirements, the quests need to be left blank. Whether or not they can be leveled to 70 in 3 months is also another issue in and of itself, Ye Xiu said. And your sister, can you shut up for a moment? Wei Chen interrupted Ye Xiu. He clearly realized that this was an issue and only one choice could be made. Doing both things at once clearly wouldn't work out. Ye Xiu didn't continue speaking. Everyone understood Wei Chen's emotions right now. Earning money by selling high skill point accounts had been his goal that he had been striving for all these years. Now they were telling him to make a choice. There was no way he would feel good right now. So, stop being so noisy. Give me some to think. Wei Chen interrupted Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu still wanted to say something, but Chen Guo grabbed him. If this guy made a caustic remark right now, it would be too infuriating to see, so Chen Guo didn't care what he planned on saying and stopped him. The practice room was very quiet. Even Steamed Bun, who didn't know what was going on, felt that the atmosphere was heavy, so he stayed silent like everyone else and stared solemnly at Wei Chen. Wei Chen didn't stop playing as he contemplated. He continued to tap his keyboard and click his mouse. He looked to be grinding his teeth before finally saying, "Okay, FCK. This senior has decided not to go into the account business. To hell with it." In the end, Wei Chen still chose the pro scene. Wei Chen had only been a pro for 2 years, while these skill points had taken him nearly 5 years of his life. For those 2 years, Wei Chen had carried his dreams with him, while in those other 5 years he had carried his livelihood. Looking at the options in front of him, Wei Chen quickly and decisively came to a decision. In the end, he chose the 2 short years despite knowing that this attempt might end up in failure again. "Good old Wei is wise. We really can't afford to go into the account business right now," Ye Xiu applauded. "Go to hell. If we don't win the championships, you'd better compensate this senior for his losses," Wei Chen cursed. "Losses? What losses?" Ye Xiu asked. "I gave up on such a big business opportunity." "If it's not a loss, then what is it?" Wei Chen was furious. "This business would require a lot of time regardless. It also has high initial costs and isn't something that can go on for a long time. The company just needs to come out with an update and it will undermine everything you worked so hard for. It really isn't worth that much," Ye Xiu said. "You talk quite deftly." Wei Chen wasn't happy. "I feel like the correct choice is to directly sell the guide," Ye Xiu said. "What did you say?" Wei Chen was surprised. "Sell the guide," Ye Xiu said. "FCK." Wei Chen suddenly awoke with a start. He suddenly jumped up, walked around in a circle, and then suddenly turned towards Ye Xiu. "You beast! Generally speaking, monopolizing the method is the way towards a long-term lifeline, but like I said before, this business won't last very long. The company will break that lifeline, so you might as well just sell the method," Ye Xiu said. "You're right. Why didn't I think of it before?" Wei Chen yelled. "If we do it like that, shouldn't we tell Concealed Light?" Chen Guo asked. "Oh, of course." Ye Xiu had a rare expression of seriousness. This incident made him realize the power of intellectuals and naturally made him respectful towards them. "How do we go about selling it? You've probably already thought of how, right?" Wei Chen said. "The higher the demand, the higher the price," Ye Xiu said plainly. "Sell it to the clubs," Wei Chen thought. The clubs would gain the most benefits from strengthening their characters and would be willing to pay a high price to do so. For a normal player, a max-skilled character would only be able to make that player a bit stronger, but for a pro team, more skill points meant stronger skills, which could be the deciding factor in a match. In addition to that, the amount of profits from winning a match was on a completely different level than a normal player winning a match in the arena. If that happens, everyone will have high-skill characters. Chen Guo sighed. Originally, their team would have a bunch of 5,000 skill point characters, while the highest amount for the other teams would be Tyranny's Desert Smoke at 4880 points. Wouldn't that be amazing? However, if everyone had 5,000 skill point characters, then their advantage would be lost. Making other opponents stronger really doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth. Wei Chen sighed as well. However, his greedy gaze betrayed him. Even though it didn't leave a good taste in his mouth, he wouldn't feel bad about taking their money. He soon continued, "But it wouldn't make them much stronger. Their characters aren't far from the limit anyways, so it wouldn't make too big of a difference." These words were to console himself. 100 to 200 skill points definitely wasn't as insignificant as Wei Chen had said it was. They might not even be able to use the method. Look how famous the names of those famous characters are. With how valuable those names are, they might not replace those characters, Chen Guo said. These words were also to console herself. God-level accounts were famous and they might actually not be replaced just for this reason, but the other characters could be replaced, no. In any case, the strengths of the teams would increase greatly. It would definitely happen. You guys want money but don't want others to benefit. You guys are really demanding, Ye Xiu said. "Hey, having such desires is a beautiful thing, but we have to accept reality," Wei Chen expressed. "But I feel like this won't be as beautiful as you imagine it will be," Ye Xiu said. "Why?" If we sell the method to the clubs right now, my guess is that the clubs will quickly group together and buy it once for the entire alliance, Ye Xiu said. If that happens, the price will go down, Wei Chen said. That's why I feel that it'd be better to find one club and then agree that they directly buy it out. If that happens, the advantage won't spread to the entire alliance. The money that we earn might not be lower than if everyone bought it together, Ye Xiu said. You demon, I have to admit you're a demon. Such an evil idea is something only a demon could come up with. Wei Chen seemed like he was praising Ye Xiu. Then which club do you plan on selling it to? Blue Rain, Tyranny, Samsara? I think Samsara is a good choice. They're very ambitious and would probably buy it for the highest price, Wei Chen said. Samsara is a good choice, but I feel like they might not be the ones who need it the most, Ye Xiu said. Then who? Wei Chen was puzzled. At this moment, Chen Guo suddenly jumped up and guessed Ye Xiu's intentions. Lulan Slash, the King's Avatar, Chapter 629. Lulan Slash, the rich guy who formed Team Heavenly Swords and is preparing to enter the Pro Alliance next season. Wei Chen had kept up with the news, so he obviously knew someone as famous as Lulan Slash. Last time, Guild Heavenly Justice had a duel of words with the other guilds in the forums and managed to win the support of many players. It was an incident that made even Wei Chen feel jealous. Yeah, he's the perfect target. Wei Chen thought about Lulan Slash's background and immediately felt like Ye Xiu's suggestion was very good. Lulan Slash had money, but because his team was new, there were still huge differences between his team and the other pro teams that were difficult to make up for with money. Of course, if you insisted on it and recklessly threw money at the problem, then it could still be done. For example, those god-level accounts might not necessarily be something that club owners wouldn't sell if the price was high enough. But the problem was that if you threw your money without any regard for the costs, it showed that you were planning on using money to solve everything. Outsiders wouldn't know whether or not Lulan Slash had any plans on doing this sort of move, but no matter the case, Ye Xiu believed that a skill point guide was enough to make his heart thump. This was something that, no matter how much money you had, it wouldn't be possible to obtain from anywhere else. Ye Xiu would be giving him an opportunity to buy it. Hurry up and contact him. Wei Chen was already impatient. More like contact Concealed Light first, Chen Guo reminded. Of course. Ye Xiu calmly opened chat windows for Lulan Slash and Concealed Light on QQ. Ye Xiu didn't ask, "Are you here?" and left them a direct message saying what he needed to say. For Concealed Light, Ye Xiu told him that they were planning on selling this skill points guide and asked if he had any opinion on them doing so. Concealed Light had been on the entire time. He had just been invisible. When he saw the message, he immediately replied in bewilderment. Do what you want. What opinions would I have? Hurry up and do what you want, Wei Chen impatiently urged. After Ye Xiu and Chen Guo gave him a disdainful look, Ye Xiu replied, This guide is very valuable. After all, without your assistance, it wouldn't have been possible to get it. You have the power to decide what we do with it. After Concealed Light read the message, he collapsed in shame. I actually only did a bit of the work. Without Professor Zhang, it really wouldn't have been possible. Then shouldn't we ask him? This has never been sold before, so I don't really know the price, but 7 figures shouldn't be a problem. Ye Xiu was worried that someone like Concealed Light, who stayed at home studying math, wouldn't know the value of this guide, so he gave this future mathematician a number. But Concealed Light replied, Are you asking me to get reprimanded? What? Ye Xiu and everyone else was startled. Professor Zhang is a world-renowned mathematician. He's never cared about money. Telling him about this would just bother him. Isn't that just going to make him angry? Concealed Light replied. Then what's important to him? Ye Xiu asked, but the answer made everyone want to cry. Scientific development, advancement of humanity, Concealed Light replied. How shameful. Wei Chen looked up at the sky and let out a deep sigh. And we still want to talk about money with him. Chen Guo was also ashamed. If you said this to a normal person, that person would definitely think you were joking, but the situation was different. For a scholar like Zhang Yichun, any results that he came out with could be something that advanced mankind, so it really wasn't a joke. It was a fact that made Ye Xiu and the others crazy. Then we'll deal with it, Ye Xiu replied. Sure. Concealed Light replied. AI. Wei Chen sighed repeatedly at this reply. Famous scholars truly think differently from normal people. Their minds aren't something that little people like us can understand. It's best if we didn't make trouble for that senior. We'll just go at it blindly. It was a classic example of someone gaining a favor and calling it a disfavor. Everyone gave him a disdainful look, but didn't say anything because Lulen had replied. Ye Xiu and Lulen didn't immediately start negotiating the price. Instead, Ye Xiu asked Lulen how things were going for him. We're busy improving ourselves so we don't lose face when the time comes. Lulen replied honestly. Don't look at how Team Heavenly Sword seemed incomparably confident, laughing at all the clubs to build up fans. In terms of actual strength, Lulen and his team clearly knew where they were at after several interactions and exchanges with Ye Xiu. If they hadn't met Ye Xiu, they might really have taken their arrogant words to the public as the truth. Fortunately, they met Ye Xiu. They still built their fanbase through their arrogant words, but Lulen didn't dare to be arrogant over their actual strength. Their team was practicing hard and had lowered their goal by a lot. Before they had met Ye Xiu, they thought that they would be a very competitive team. Now their goal had been changed to not lose too much face. Others who heard their actual goal might think they were being modest, but Ye Xiu knew that Lulen was being sincere. How are your accounts? Ye Xiu asked. They're okay. Lulen replied vaguely. How many skill points do each of your characters have? Ye Xiu began to move towards the main subject. Lulen saw the question and was surprised. He took some time to reflect on it. He clearly knew that this god wasn't chatting with him because he was bored, but because he had a purpose in mind. This sudden question must have something to do with this purpose. Skill points truly was something that Lulen couldn't do much about. Did Ye Xiu have some way of resolving this problem? After thinking for a bit, Lulen became excited but still calmly replied. Skill points. Not bad, I'd say. Our characters have been pretty lucky, so we have a lot of skill points. Ha ha, don't tell me your accounts all have max skill points, Ye Xiu said. How could that be? There are any characters in the entire game with max skill points? Lulen was probing Ye Xiu, but he was starting to become amazed because he had a feeling as to what Ye Xiu's intentions were. There haven't been any, but now maybe not, Ye Xiu said. You have such an account, Lulen questioned. It's very likely, Ye Xiu said. Likely, because it still depends on luck, so it isn't completely guaranteed. Ye Xiu replied. What do you mean luck? Lulen couldn't pretend any longer. Let alone a character with max skill points. There weren't even any with over 4,900 skill points. Characters with 4,800 skill points were usually famous stars in the pro scene. It wasn't by chance that these characters became famous. Having such a high number of skill points was an important deciding factor in these pro games. The characters used by Lulen's team didn't have a low number of skill points. They had between 4,700 and 4,800 skill points, which was quite decent in the pro scene, but there was still a gap between their characters and the top characters, let alone a character with max skill points. If you had that many skill points, then that was how much you had. What did it have to do with luck? Lulen couldn't understand, so he asked this question. To tell you the truth, I have a method of getting skill points. The very first thing I thought of was that you might need it. Isn't that kind of me? Ye Xiu replied. Very kind. Lulen replied, but he was bitterly laughing in his heart. He wasn't stupid. He understood what Ye Xiu was getting at. The very first thing Ye Xiu thought of was him. That wasn't kindness. Ye Xiu clearly wanted his money. However, Lulan Slash didn't care because he needed it. If someone could provide him with a solution, he would happily take them up on that offer. After replying, very kind, Lulan Slash didn't say anything else. He wanted to wait until the other side came out with his offer, but after waiting and waiting, there was no reply. Lulan Slash was sad. He wanted to know the other side's price and start negotiating from there, but the other side was truly fierce. Ye Xiu pretended like he was dead, putting on a "do you want to or not" appearance. Lulan Slash wanted to cry. Ye Xiu was telling him that he couldn't be like this. Helpless, Lulan Slash could only start the conversation. What type of method is it? It's a certain way of completing quests. I can guarantee that there's a high chance of obtaining skill books as a reward. Ye Xiu replied quickly. He had clearly been sitting in front of his computer the entire time. He had purposely pretended to be dead, but Lulan Slash didn't have a choice. How new? I've never heard of it before. Lulan Slash had ambitions to flourish in the pro scene and had obviously put a lot of effort into researching skill points, but he had never heard of this method before. Of course you haven't. An old comrade of mine sacrificed much of his youth bitterly researching it before getting these results. Ye Xiu said. I see. What are your plans? Lulan Slash asked. My plan is to see if you have any plans. Ye Xiu replied. Okay, Lulan Slash said weakly. Let's get to the point. If you really can get characters with max skill points, then I obviously need them very much. I thought so too. Give me a price, I'll need 9. Lulan Slash said. 9. If I need more, I'll look for you, Lulan Slash said. Why not just directly buy the guide itself? Ye Xiu replied. You're willing to sell it? Lulan Slash was surprised. Why not? Ye Xiu asked back. Lulan Slash replied, but why should I buy the whole guide? I only need enough characters for my team. The King's Avatar. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com Chapter 630 Why Should I? When Lulan Slash asked this question, it was Ye Xiu's turn to become dazed. Why should I? Ye Xiu had helped Lulan Slash think of a reason, but his reasoning hadn't matched Lulan Slash's. You're too polite, Ye Xiu replied. Indeed, Ye Xiu's side felt like Lulan Slash was being too polite. Why would you not just straight up buy the guide and instead settle for the next best thing and only buy a batch of accounts? How am I being polite? Lulan Slash didn't understand. His line of thinking was clearly different from what Ye Xiu had analyzed his thinking to be. If you have the guide, you can make however many accounts you'd like. Ye Xiu explained. Ha ha, wouldn't buying the guide be much more expensive though? I don't need that many accounts, just 10 is enough. Lulan Slash answered back. It would actually be more difficult for us to get those accounts to you rather than give you the guide itself, Ye Xiu said. So you're saying that if I want to buy it, I have to buy the guide at a high price? Lulan Slash asked. Pretty much, Ye Xiu said. If that's the case, you'll need to give me some time to think about it. Lulan Slash replied. If he had to think about it, then it meant that he was leaning towards rejecting the offer and only had a bit of leeway remaining. If he was seriously considering it, he would have at least asked for the price. However, Lulan Slash didn't even ask about the price and had jumped straight to considering it. This wasn't a good sign for Ye Xiu's side. If this had been us previously, we would have bought it without any hesitation. We would have bought it out too, so that no one else would be able to get it and guarantee our advantage over the other teams. Lulan Slash didn't hide his reasons and started discussing with Ye Xiu. Then what about now? Luckily we bumped into you. You helped us realize that our original ideas had been careless. With just our skill level alone, we thought we would be able to immediately compete with those powerhouses. We were too ignorant and narrow-minded, so we decided to do things realistically. We'll first establish a solid position in the pro scene before doing anything. Of course, we need characters with high skill points, but any player would want a character like that. The current us isn't thinking of expending all of our efforts to weaken our opponents. Even if we do weaken them a bit, it wouldn't change our overall situation too much. Improving our actual skill is the most stable way of improve our chances. We aren't thinking of doing anything else at the moment. Lulan Slash was very honest and showed his gratefulness towards Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu read the message and could only force a smile. Then good luck. Thank you. If you can provide accounts with high skill points, contact me at any time. The price won't be a problem. Lulan Slash said. Understood, Ye Xiu replied. He turned around and forced a smile at Wei Chen and Chen Guo. Their first plan had failed. It turned into selling accounts. The price for accounts would still be considerable, but compared to their original plan, it was still a huge difference. Then we're going to give up just like this. Wei Chen wasn't willing. There's nothing we can do. His line of thinking is completely different from ours. Ye Xiu said. I can see that. I could also tell that the reason his line of thinking is different is all because of you, Wei Chen accused him. Life is full of twists, as you can see, Ye Xiu said. What do we do now? Wei Chen said. It looks like we can only look for another pro team to sell it to, Ye Xiu said. Samsara? Wei Chen asked. The ambitious Samsara is a very suitable target, Ye Xiu said. Samsara will be in the playoffs. We have to hurry up and sell them our guide beforehand. Their price will definitely be a lot higher, Wei Chen said. There are still 2 weeks. I don't know if Concealed Light will be able to arrange everything by then. Ye Xiu thought and looked for Concealed Light on QQ to check how long it would take. HM, are we in a rush? Concealed Light asked. Yeah, I'll try to finish it in a week. Concealed Light estimated. Good luck. Time isn't an issue. Ye Xiu turned around and spoke. As long as we can get the guide ready, Samsara can easily upgrade their characters in 2 days. Then let's contact Samsara, Wei Chen asked. There's no hurry. Wait for Concealed Light to finish first and we'll personally take a trip to City C, Ye Xiu said. Wait, did you not think about an issue? Chen Guo suddenly interrupted. What? Ye Xiu looked at her. If Samsara suddenly won the championships with a bunch of max-skilled characters, wouldn't that attract more eyes towards this method? The game company would definitely notice it. If they saw through the process and came out with an update getting rid of it, wouldn't that be trouble for us too? The characters that we have now will be upgraded in time, but what about the others? Our team won't just have these 4 characters, right? Chen Guo said. Oh, don't worry about that. Samsara is a pro team and their characters are already quite good. I'm guessing that all of them have at least 4,700 skill points. If we give them the guide, we'll only be helping them push towards that final hurdle. As long as they don't run too many quests, the game company won't find out so easily, Ye Xiu said. But what if they've already done the quests and have to create new accounts? Chen Guo had a lot of thoughts. New accounts. If it's a new account, it will take at least 3 months. Even pro teams won't be able to go any faster than that. By that time, we'll have a batch of characters too, so we won't lose out, Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo heard Ye Xiu's explanation before finally relaxing. In the end, she only sighed. But that means in the future there'll be stronger opponents. Aren't you looking down on Lulan Slash too much? Won't they be getting stronger too? Ye Xiu said. It's the difference between 1 + 1 = 2 and 9 + 1 = 10, Chen Guo said. That's the reason why Lulan Slash isn't willing to buy it, Ye Xiu sighed. Isn't it because of you? Wei Chen gave him a disdainful look. In any case, that's our plan for now. Once Concealed Light arranges everything, we'll make a trip to visit Samsara, Ye Xiu said. This time, if you don't sell it, don't come back, Wei Chen said. Concealed Light's diligence didn't need to be said. He said 1 week, but on the 5th day he had already completed the guide. He wrote it in a Word doc and sent it over. After receiving the guide, Ye Xiu skimmed through it and checked it every time Concealed Light sent a doc over. As Concealed Light sent over parts of the guide, Ye Xiu, Steamed Bun, and Tang Ru continued to follow them. The skill points on Lord Grim, Soft Mist, and Steamed Bun Invasion continually shot up. The highest was Ye Xiu's Lord Grim because soft mist and steamed bun invasion couldn't enter the heavenly domain yet, so there were a lot of quests that they couldn't complete yet. Ye Xiu's Lord Grim ran between the two servers and cleared out all the quests. His skill points rose like a rocket. His level wasn't max yet, so he couldn't do some of the high-leveled quests yet. However, he already had maximized his potential skill points. The guide increased the drop chances, and Ye Xiu's luck was quite good. Once he got 5,000 skill points, Wei Chen became conflicted. His windward formation had done all these quests before, so he had no way of improving his character anymore. He didn't think that Ye Xiu would really be able to get all 5,000 skill points. If he didn't switch accounts, he would have less skill points. If he switched accounts, his windward formation wouldn't have the chance of rising to the top. It made Wei Chen very depressed. I feel like we don't need to give Samsara everything. Ye Xiu inspected the guide and got rid of a portion of it. In the end, he left enough for an additional 1,000 skill points. Right now, they just need a way to have their characters increase by a level. If I just give them these, it'll be enough. There's no need to give them everything, Ye Xiu said. Chen Guo supported this idea very much. Chen Guo's biggest hope was that they would keep the guide to themselves and no one else would have it. There was no other choice, though, but if they could give less of the guide to the other side, that was worthy of being happy about too. Then it'll just be these. Ye Xiu looked at the remaining content. I just hope that Samsara won't have done too many of these quests already. If so, this will be more than enough. Since their base is already so high, if they haven't already completed these quests, just a little bump should be enough, Chen Guo said. Listening to you, we should get rid of another 500 points, Ye Xiu said. Good, Chen Guo agreed. Okay, you've been doing these quests too. How many points does your character have? Ye Xiu asked. 280 points, Chen Guo said sadly. 280 points, and you're saying it so sadly. I reckon that something like this has only happened in our room. Ye Xiu sighed and then added, out of the 1,600 skill points, you seriously only managed to get 280 points. The issue of them having already completed the quests is a serious problem. We should leave them some room for hope. Chen Guo listened and didn't say anything more. Then when will you be going? The sooner the better. I'll take a look at the tickets there. Chen Guo said. These sorts of expenses were naturally paid for by the boss. Do you know who to look for in Samsara? You'd better not get kicked out of the place immediately, Wei Chen said. If you went, you would definitely get kicked out. How could I be like you? Ye Xiu retorted. Will the plane tomorrow morning be okay? Chen Guo checked the ticket and called out. Sure. Ye Xiu nodded his head. What's your ID number? Ye Xiu sent over his ID number on QQ to Chen Guo, who quickly finished up the rest of the preparations. The King's Avatar, Chapter 630. 1. The city's temperature in May was neither high nor low, and the air was humid and comfortable. However, Ye Xiu was the type who stayed indoors for long periods of time, so his reaction towards the difference in the climate was quite slow. He didn't realize that there was any change. After arriving from the plane, he called for a taxi and went straight to Club Samsara, not even stopping at the hotel beforehand. The unsuccessful trade with Lulan Slash caused Ye Xiu to be much more careful with the upcoming discussion. After discussing the issue with Wei Chen and the others again and again, they came to the conclusion that Samsara had no reason to reject their offer. Their intentions on becoming the champion this season was very obvious. It could be seen from their marketing during the 2-week break before the playoffs. It was impossible for them to reject this guide for skill points. The only possibility was that they might refuse to buy it out completely. As for this problem, Ye Xiu had been discussing it with the team these past few days. If they didn't buy it out, it meant they would be letting Ye Xiu go to another team to sell the guide. If that were the case, then Samsara wouldn't have any advantage over the other teams. After thinking about it over and over again, Everyone felt that the possibility of Samsara buying it out was the highest out of all the teams. Ye Xiu would arrive at Club Samsara soon. Of course, he wasn't planning on breaking through their front entrance. After all, he couldn't use his face as a pass. Wei Chen's worry wasn't for nothing. He had a high chance of being driven out by the security guards before even entering. Ye Xiu made a call from a public telephone booth outside the club and then paced back and forth in front of the entrance. Not long afterwards, a person jogged out from within the club building and glanced around outside the gate. When Ye Xiu waved towards him, that person hurried over. "Long time no see." The two greeted each other. Tong Lin, an ex-pro gamer of glory, was currently employed at the club. He had retired 3 years ago and worked in Samsara Club's technology department. The professional circle for Glory wasn't too big. There were around 200 people total. In the initial stages of the professional scene, the scale had been even smaller. There weren't even 20 teams and not all the teams had 10 people, so at that time there were even fewer people, so the pro gamers were much more familiar with each other. Ye Xiu had been in the scene from the very start until now, so it was evident that he knew everyone in it. It was just a matter of how deeply he knew everyone. Some people he only nodded his head at, while some he could chat well with. Tong Lin belonged to the latter. Although he wasn't a god, his love for glory wasn't any less than any other pro. After retiring and joining the technology department, he continued to work diligently and tirelessly. Ye Xiu contacted his old friend for his trip to bring in his message and enter the gate. Tong Lin was far from having the influence to make any decisions in the trade, though. As the two chatted, they walked through Samsara's entrance. With Tong Lin there, the security guards by the door didn't ask any questions. When Ye Xiu had previously been walking around the entrance, they had cautiously kept an eye on him. After all, the playoffs were coming up. They couldn't risk distracting the pro gamers, who were vigorously preparing and training for the upcoming competition. The club's work requirements in various departments had become much more strict these past few days. "What business do you have here? You were so secretive on the phone," Tong Lin asked as he guided Ye Xiu along. "It's definitely something good for Samsara," Ye Xiu said. "Haha, what good could you possibly bring to Samsara?" Tong Lin laughed. "You'll know when I show it to you later," Ye Xiu said. "All right." Tong Lin didn't ask any further. He directly brought Ye Xiu up to the club's 3rd level, which was where his office in the technology department was located. "Tell me, what are you going to show me?" "I'm waiting." After telling Ye Xiu to sit down, Tong Lin smiled. "You have spare glory account cards here, don't you?" Ye Xiu asked. "Would you believe me if I said no?" Tong Lin spoke. "What class do you need?" "The class doesn't matter, but the fewer quests completed, the better," Ye Xiu spoke. "We haven't been keeping track of that," Tong Lin said. "Then just give me any 2, Ye Xiu said. Tong Lin opened the drawer and randomly grabbed 2 account cards. "Is here okay? Or do you want to head for the lab?" Tong Lin asked. "Lab," Ye Xiu laughed. "That's what everyone calls it. It's a force of habit now," Tong Lin explained. "Here is fine." Ye Xiu stood up and walked over. Tong Lin immediately stepped away from the computer and left the 2 cards there. "These 2 accounts are yours, or?" Ye Xiu casually picked one up and asked. "Mine," Tong Lin said. "Then how lucky of you." Ye Xiu smiled. Tong Lin was still confused as Ye Xiu quickly logged onto the game. Ye Xiu didn't care about what Tong Lin's character was called, which server, which class, or what equipment he had. Ye Xiu only checked the character's location and immediately looked up a direction to run towards while asking Tong Lin, "Do you still remember what sort of tasks this character has completed?" "This, I don't really remember," Tong Lin said. "Then I'll just try a few," Ye Xiu said. "What on earth are you trying to do?" Tong Lin asked. "Don't worry, you'll know soon enough." Ye Xiu kept him guessing without revealing anything. He controlled Tong Lin's character, while sprinting towards a place that he remembered that had one of the select quests. After talking to the NPC with the quest, it seemed like Tong Lin hadn't completed this quest before. After seeing Ye Xiu accept the quest, Tong Lin hurriedly moved closer to look. "Which quest is this?" Ye Xiu opened the quest's panel for Tong Lin to see the quest's name. Tong Lin looked at it and tried to recall this quest in his head, but he couldn't remember anything odd about this quest. He then watched Ye Xiu continue to play. He followed the quest chain and completed it step by step. "You came here to help complete quests for my account," Tong Lin laughed. "Don't get so worked up yet. What's worth the excitement has yet to come." Ye Xiu said, "What are you trying to do? Stop hinting and just tell me." Tong Lin was getting anxious. However, Ye Xiu didn't hurry. In actual fact, he was afraid of making mistakes. After all, this had to be done precisely according to the calculations that Concealed Light and his mentor had made, so he couldn't be careless. "Pay attention." At last, the quest had reached the last stage when Ye Xiu immediately called out to Tong Lin. "I've been paying attention this whole time," Tong Lin said from the side. After clicking the character, the task was completed and a row of congratulatory words flashed by. Ye Xiu wasn't let down. The skill book was rewarded. The task he chose to show obviously had a high succeeding rate. For this particular quest, after being analyzed over and over by Concealed Light and his mentor, they had found that there was a 57.258% chance of a skill book being dropped upon completion. For skill books, a percentage like that was high enough to scare a person to death. Skill book. Tong Lin was patient and had been paying attention the entire time. The reward that flashed by didn't escape his eyes. He clearly saw these two words. He immediately realized that the skill book must have been what Ye Xiu had been hiding from him the entire time. Apart from this, there was nothing else to see. A skill book with 25 skill points, how about that? Aren't you excited? Ye Xiu started to open the inventory of Tong Lin's character. A 25 skill point skill book was laying there. It wasn't a coincidence. Tong Lin's mind started to churn. It was a coincidence, but at the same time it wasn't. Ye Xiu spoke. "Stop with the suspense and mystery, just tell it to me directly," Tong Lin yelled. "It's a coincidence because the skill book isn't guaranteed. It wasn't a coincidence because I used a method for a skill book to have an increased chance at dropping. If not for me, I don't know how many times you would have to complete this mission in order to receive this reward." Ye Xiu said. "Stand aside and let me see." Tong Lin pushed Ye Xiu aside and controlled his character. He checked the inventory once again and confirmed that it was a skill book without a doubt. He scrolled through the records and confirmed that this skill book was in fact the reward from the previous task. Soon afterwards, Tong Lin checked a website and found the quest. In the end, he couldn't pick out any related information that connected the quest to a skill book. "Don't waste your time. We were only able to get this thanks to an old friend's many years of research," Ye Xiu said. "Who?" Tong Lin hurriedly asked. "Wei Chen," Ye Xiu spoke. "It's that guy." Tong Lin was also a pro gamer from the older generation. How could he not know the former captain of Team Blue Rain? "What you're saying is that he found a special way to complete certain quests that give a chance for a skill book to be rewarded." Tong Lin was in the technology department, so he figured it out quite quickly. "Correct." Ye Xiu nodded. "How high is the drop rate?" Tong Lin asked. "Around 50%, Ye Xiu said. "How did you come up with this number?" Tong Lin asked. "I might scare you to death by telling you the truth, so I shouldn't tell you," Ye Xiu said. Tong Lin rolled his eyes. "If you don't say it now, someone else will definitely ask about it later." Tong Lin was a senior figure in the industry. After figuring out how it worked, he immediately had a rough prediction of Ye Xiu's intentions upon visiting Samsara. "We have an outstanding student with us. He used his mathematical knowledge and whatever to calculate this. You know that we wouldn't be able to understand that kind of stuff. In any case, we listened and did as we were told. We don't have the ability to perform large-scale tests to confirm the drop rates. If you're interested, you can perform these tests at a later time." "Don't you have a lab or something?" Ye Xiu said. The drop rate isn't actually too important. What's important is its effectiveness. Do you know what I mean? Tong Lin said. I understand. Ye Xiu smiled calmly. I believe that it's effective. It only has a 50% chance of being rewarded. As long as it's not 100%, then it could prove to be ineffective, Tong Lin said. But this is only one quest. You wouldn't think that I would only take one task and excitedly run to Samsara to sell just this, did you? Ye Xiu said. Then how many do you have? Tong Lin asked. If you add all of the tasks together, it's worth an additional 1,000 skill points, Ye Xiu said. FCK, Tong Lin's eyes went wide. In the next second he rushed over and grabbed Ye Xiu, fearing he would run away. Go, 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 let's go. Go where? Ye Xiu deliberately asked. Where do you think? Tong Lin didn't answer the obvious. After dragging Ye Xiu out of his office, he went down from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor and walked to the end of the building. Midway through, they passed the practice room. A Samsara pro player was holding a cup of water and was walking loitering near the entrance of the practice room. When he saw Tong Lin come over, he naturally recognized him and politely called out, "Senior." Tong Lin smiled and nodded while he was grabbing onto a guy tightly as if he had caught a robber. That guy being grabbed was even walking in a weird way as a result. That guy also smiled and gave him a nod. Who was this guy? Why did he answer me when I said senior? He seemed really familiar. Was he a waiter at a restaurant? The pro player didn't say anything, but he made a lot of guesses. Suddenly, he remembered who that person was. The surprise caused his hand to tip. The boiling water in the cup spilled out and the burn immediately caused him to loosen his grip. Pa! A crisp sound was made as the cup shattered. The pro player was at a loss. He was still gazing at the silhouette that was being dragged away by Tong Lin. After hearing the sound, Ye Xiu and Tong Lin turned back to take a look. After seeing that it was just a broken cup, they continued to walk. On the other hand, when the other pro players inside the practice room heard the noise coming from outside the door, they all came out to see what had happened. In the end, they only saw a pro player standing stupidly outside the door. When they realized that it was only a cup being broken, everyone was about to leave, but before leaving, they saw the pro player lift his right hand and point at the silhouette that had already turned around the corner. Ye Xiu. What? The pro players didn't hear clearly. Ye Xiu, it's Ye Xiu. I saw Senior Tong Lin dragging Ye Xiu away just a moment ago. Senior Tong Lin dragging Ye Xiu, all the pro gamers were stupefied. As for Tong Lin, they obviously wouldn't find anything strange with him, but Ye Xiu. Why would this guy appear at Samsara at this time? Their gossiping spirits had been kindled. Which way did they go? Vice Captain Jiang Batao asked. That way. The pro player pointed. The manager's office. After turning that way in the hallway, there was nowhere else to go apart from the manager's office. Let's go have a look. Jiang Batao turned his head and spoke to Zhou Zekai. They were the captain and vice captain. At this age, only those with some status would be able to go and have a look. Zhou Zekai didn't say anything yet when the practice room phone rang. A pro player hurriedly ran over to receive it. He said a few words before hanging up. He ran over to Zhou Zekai and Jiang Batao. Captain and vice captain, the manager is asking for you two to head over. Jiang Batao and Zhou Zekai looked at each other in the eye. Everyone thought that it had to be related to Ye Xiu's visit. The two were prepared to go when the phone rang again. The same person ran over to receive it. He hurriedly dashed out again to face Zhou Zekai and Jiang Batao. The manager says to bring your account cards with you. Bring our account cards. What for? Everyone made wild guesses. Zhou Zekai and Jiang Batao didn't understand, but nevertheless, they returned to the practice room and grabbed their account's cards with them. Please enter. After knocking on the manager's door, they heard the manager's voice and entered. The manager wasn't sitting in his office chair. In the guest sofa, he and Tong Lin sat there with another person in the middle. I don't need to introduce them to you, do I? The manager laughed. It's little Zhou and little Jiang. Haha, you two are doing pretty well this season. Ye Xiu smiled as he greeted the King's Avatar Chapter 632, High God Yi. Jiang Batao greeted back. Zhou Zekai simply smiled in a friendly manner. He looked as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he remained silent. Little Zhou still doesn't like to speak, ha ha. Ye Xiu laughed. Everyone looked towards him, but Zhou Zekai still didn't say anything and just continued to smile. Truthfully, someone who wasn't good at expressing one's thoughts like Zhou Zekai wasn't suited to be the team captain. If he was even had a hard time greeting someone, giving words of encouragement to his team at crucial moments would be impossible. But even though he wasn't a good speaker, he wouldn't lose to anyone in terms of skill. Zhou Zekai was currently considered the #1 player in Glory right now by many. His skill and technique were the real deal. His performance on stage was filled with energy. It could be said that once he took control his character, the aura he gave off completely changed. No one would think that the person controlling such a stylish character would be so quiet in real life. Whether or not he really was the best player in the alliance was still up for debate, but if it was the difference between his playstyle and his real self, then no one would be able to contest with Zhou Zekai. Through his performance on stage, Zhou Zekai was still someone who the team greatly relied on. They knew that even if their team captain didn't like to speak, he would never disappointed them on stage. They just needed to match his pace and they would do well. The tactics and strategies used by professional teams usually revolved around their team's core player, but no other team relied on their core player as much as Samsara did. Their reliance on Zhou Zekai won their team the nickname one-man team in the alliance. That had been true up until Jiang Batao became Samsara's vice-captain. Samsara's playstyle had completely revolved around Zhou Zekai, but because Zhou Zekai didn't like to speak, his teammates would often have trouble understanding his actions, which affected their past records. However, Jiang Batao understood Zhou Zekai very well. He could accurately read the purpose of every single one of Zhou Zekai's actions, so he became the bridge between Zhou Zekai and the rest of the team. Samsara's one-man team style didn't disappear. However, because of Jiang Batao, the synergy between Zhou Zekai and the rest of the team improved significantly. Samsara burst forth and many believed that they had the highest chance of becoming the champions in this season. Samsara restrained themselves the entire time. The nickname, one-man team, was not a compliment, but through their success, they hoped to prove that one-man team wasn't impossible and erase the ridicule that was implied by the name. Samsara thirsted to become the champions, so when Tong Lin brought Ye Xiu over to the manager and gave a brief introduction to what Ye Xiu had in his hands, the manager hastily called over the captain and vice-captain. He wanted their two strongest accounts to personally try it for themselves. Ye Xiu saw the manager give them a call and tell them to bring their account cards. He figured out his intentions, but he didn't stop him. When he saw Zhou Zekai and Jiang Batao enter the room, he greeted them and then smiled towards the manager. "Are you trying to take advantage of me? I don't even know if you're going to buy it or not and you want me to give them skill points." "Ha ha ha," Samsara's manager. "If what you say is really true, then even if you wanted to leave, you wouldn't be able to. I'll make you spill the beans even if I have to murder you." This was obviously a joke, but everyone could feel his determination. Zhou Zekai and Jiang Batao were still puzzled as to what was going on. In the end, Jiang Batao asked, "What is it?" "Skill books," Ye Xiu answered. "Skill books." Jiang Batao still wasn't sure what was going on. 1,000 skill points worth of skill books. How many skill points does your empty waves have? Ye Xiu smiled. Empty waves was Jiang Batao's character. It was the #1 spellblade in Glory and a character that excellent eras Liu Hao envied the most. These characters had a difficult time getting any additional skill points, so it wasn't any secret. Jiang Batao quickly answered, 4820. If your luck is good, that number can potentially be 5,000. Now do you know what I've brought with me? Ye Xiu smiled. Jiang Batao's eyes went wide. Zhou Zekai also revealed an astonished expression. They obviously knew the importance of skill points, but at the same time, they knew even better how difficult it was to find skill books. These things couldn't be traded. Shall we try it out with empty waves? Ye Xiu suggested to the manager. Sure, sure. The manager hastily nodded his head. Tong Lin had explained it to him before. Even though he knew that Tong Lin wouldn't come over and say such a thing as a joke, he still had a hard time believing it, so he wanted to see if it was true for himself. Jiang Batao received the manager's approval and handed over empty waves to Ye Xiu. Ye Xiu used the manager's computer and logged into the game. The manager, Tong Lin, Zhou Zekai, and Jiang Batao stood behind Ye Xiu. He logged into the game and moved the character around. Ye Xiu asked Jiang Batao if he had finished the quest before. Jiang Batao naturally had no idea. No one could remember every single quest that their characters had completed, even more so for pro characters. The person using the account might not have been the one to level up the account themselves. We'll see then. Ye Xiu also gave it a try like he did with Tong Lin's character. So you're saying that if this quest has been completed before, there's no way of getting the skill book? The manager quickly found the key point. Of course, Ye Xiu said. If that really is the case, then you can only blame your bad luck. Ye Xiu sighed. Empty Waves was an all-star level character. It wasn't Tong Lin's private account. Once he logged into the game, he walked through the streets and the news quickly spread in the global chat. Countless players reported his whereabouts, and the guild Samsara was chattering non-stop about Empty Waves as well. His friends, as well as strangers, repeatedly sent him messages. They gave him words of encouragement, expectations, etc. for this character, who would soon be participating in the playoffs. Wow, you're very popular, huh? Ye Xiu continued to move towards the quest location as he gazed at the chat. The people behind him didn't care about all this. It wasn't anything new that a scene like this would occur whenever a pro character logged into the game, let alone an all-star level one like Empty Waves. So when Ye Xiu gave this remark, the others gave a laugh absent-mindedly, but didn't say anything further. Soon afterwards, Ye Xiu reached the NPC giving the quest, but when he spoke to the NPC didn't give any response. Ye Xiu turned his head in regret. Too bad. You'll never get the chance to get this 25 skill point book. Jiang Batao had pretty much figured out what was going on. When he heard Ye Xiu say these words, he felt very sad too. However, Ye Xiu's first few words gave him hope. Didn't you say there were 1,000 skill points? I pray that your character hasn't done all of the quests, Ye Xiu said. All of them are quest rewards, the manager asked a second question. Yes, Ye Xiu nodded his head. Everyone fell silent and continued to watch Ye Xiu move Empty Waves to the second location. The NPC still didn't reply back. Ye Xiu turned around and looked at Jiang Batao. 20 more points gone. 45 points. Jiang Batao began calculating. There were originally 1,000 points total, but 45 points were gone. He calculated how many points he had left and felt reassured. He only needed 180 points. There were 955 points left. No problem. Jiang Batao thought like this. Ye Xiu already found the third NPC. This time, the quest prompt popped up. Ye Xiu accepted the quest. Jiang Batao immediately knew this time was good and became extremely excited. Ye Xiu followed the steps according to the guide. The four people behind him didn't take their gaze off the screen. They didn't dare to breathe loudly. Finally, the final part of the quest chain came. Tong Lin had already seen this happen before and felt excited. He tapped the manager's shoulder, telling him to watch carefully. But when he handed in the quest, the words that Tong Lin had anticipated didn't come. The manager was somewhat puzzled. He looked questioningly at Tong Lin, but then he saw Ye Xiu say to Jiang Batao, You're really unlucky. This quest should have had a 63% chance of getting a 20-point skill book, but you actually didn't get one. So, that's how it works. Jiang Batao was depressed. So from the sounds of it, even if you finish the quest, it isn't guaranteed that you'll get the skill book. The manager found the key point again. Then what's the probability of getting skill points out of these 1,000 points worth of skill books? The manager asked. Around 50%. In other words, if the quests haven't been done. With the foundation that your accounts have, getting the max 5,000 skill points shouldn't be too big of a problem, Ye Xiu said. How did you get the number 50%? The manager asked. It was calculated, but don't ask me how it was calculated in detail. I can't tell you. Even if I could, I doubt you'd be able to understand. This was a number that a specialist came up with, Ye Xiu said. Then how can we believe that this number is reliable? The manager asked. Take Empty Wave's account and see if you can get to 5,000 skill points, Ye Xiu said. Sure, the manager nodded his head. You wish. Ye Xiu objected. He took out an account card from his pocket and waved it at them. Let me open your eyes. He logged into the game, and without doing anything else, Ye Xiu clicked open the skill tree and pointed at the right corner of the screen. They obviously knew what was in this position. They saw that the number of skill points on this character was an impressive 4,920. The King's Avatar Chapter 633-4920. Even though it wasn't the maximum 5,000 points, it was shocking enough already. This random account in Ye Xiu's hands had already broken the 4,900-point zone that had never been broken through before. As for your characters, true gold never fears fire. These quests will certainly improve the skill points on your characters, but my one fear is that your characters will have already done most of the quests. If that's the case, there's nothing I can do for you. From the looks of it, Little Jiang's Empty Waves isn't the case. Little Joe, has your great gunner cleared any of these quests? Ye Xiu said. No, Zhou Zekai shook his head. What do you think? Ye Xiu asked. Don't count on me trying out these quests on all of your accounts. If I do that, the skill points on your characters will probably go up. When that time comes, wouldn't that be a huge loss in profits for me? Ye Xiu said as he looked sympathetically at Jiang Batao. Your luck is really bad. Even if this deal didn't go through, your character could have gotten a 20-point skill book for free. Unfortunately, only Old Tong benefited. God Yi, you're being too suspicious. If it really works, how could we not want it? Samsara's manager kindly said. Ye Xiu heard the implication in his words and smiled. So right now you're hoping for some concrete proof, right? After all, you heard me say 60%, but that number doesn't seem too reliable. It looks like this 4920 character still isn't enough proof in your eyes. Ha ha ha. Samsara's manager laughed without explaining himself. This had clearly been what he meant. Ye Xiu never said how he managed to get the skill points and only showed the results. It wasn't very convincing at all. The 4920-point character was astonishing, but Glory had such a large player base and it had been so many years. Who could say whether there was a character with such high skill points out there? Samsara's manager had seen the account card. It was a second edition card, which meant that it had been issued when Glory's second server opened. If an old account like this account had extraordinary luck, it wasn't impossible for it to have an incredible amount of skill points. But just like he said, if this method truly worked, Samsara would absolutely buy it, but because they would definitely buy it, the value of this method would not be low. He had to be careful before closing a large business deal such as this one. If that's the case, you can keep on thinking about it. I'll be leaving. Ye Xiu logged out, grabbed his account card and got up. Samsara's manager looked at him in alarm. He was actually just going to leave. Did he not have any intentions on marketing his product? But after thinking about it again, he quickly understood that Ye Xiu didn't need Samsara to buy it. If he brought this method to any other club, who wouldn't want to buy it? Thus, Samsara's manager thought up another issue. How many clubs had this guy already talked to? Did the other clubs already have a team of 5,000 skill point characters by now, while they were hesitating? If that really was the case, then they had to buy it no matter what. Thinking about this issue, there was no way Samsara's manager could sit still. Ye Xiu hadn't even taken 2 steps yet when the manager stopped him. Seeing the manager move, Tong Lin and Jiang Batao naturally helped him persuade Ye Xiu. Zhou Zekai also wanted to help, but this sort of situation was even more challenging for him than participating in the playoffs. He walked around the other 4 in circles, but he couldn't find an opportunity to say anything. God Yi, there's something that I have to know, Samsara's manager said. What? Have any of the other clubs bought this method yet? Samsara's manager asked. How can I answer that? Ye Xiu answered back. See, the price is very different depending on whether or not this method has already been bought by other clubs, don't you think? Samsara's manager explained. Ha ha ha, if you say it like that, of course no one else has bought it yet, Ye Xiu happily replied. This reply made Samsara's manager want to cry. Are you telling the truth or not? I didn't say anything, but you had to ask. When I gave you an answer, you didn't believe me. What am I supposed to say? Why don't you just act like it has already been bought by others and give a starting price from there? Ye Xiu said. So no one else has bought it. Samsara's manager was very careful. I'm going, Ye Xiu threatened. Don't be in such a hurry. Let's take some time to talk about it. It must have been a long trip here. Have you eaten yet? How about we get some food? Samsara's manager started firing sugar-coated bullets. Ha ha! Ye Xiu chuckled. Sure, I'd be willing to stay and eat. I'm not in a hurry, but you guys should be. If you get more skill points, wouldn't you need to do some research on how to distribute these new skill points? Wouldn't you need to try out the newly leveled skills and get used to them? Do you even have the time to eat with me? How many days is it until the playoff match? Ye Xiu said. Samsara's manager listened and thought it was reasonable. Even though he wasn't an expert in glory, he was the manager of the club, so he still understood this sort of general knowledge. Thus, Samsara's manager grit his teeth. Okay, let's sit down and talk. He had wanted to carefully probe the situation, but they were on the passive side from beginning to end. There was nothing he could have done about that. The bargaining chip in Ye Xiu's hands was something that couldn't be refused. Buy out. Once they started talking about the deal, Samsara's manager wanted to head in this direction, but the bargaining chip in Ye Xiu's hands was too valuable. The price for buying it out certainly wouldn't be low. Even worse, what could they measure the price against? If a character didn't have a solid base like their pro characters, 1,000 skill points worth of quests wasn't enough to max out the skill points. But even if the character didn't have a solid base, a character that surpassed any of the pro characters could still be created through this method. What the price should be was something Samsara's manager wasn't sure about either. As a result, he didn't give a price for now, and instead tried to feel out Ye Xiu's intentions. At the same time, he would tell the boss about this deal. The buyout price would be very high, but it was completely necessary, so he needed to let the boss know about it. After negotiations officially began, Zhou Zekai and Jiang Batao left. Tong Lin didn't participate either. This sort of deal required a certain amount of secrecy. Because the seller absolutely needed to buy it, Ye Xiu held the advantage in this negotiation. As a former pro player, he had a strong mental fortitude. He was calm and unhurried, making it difficult for Samsara's manager to handle. Take advantage of Ye Xiu. Samsara's manager didn't have any thoughts about doing so. Right now, the other side was currently showing reluctance towards his plan to buy out the guide. I suddenly feel like I made a mistake, Ye Xiu suddenly said. What is it? Samsara's manager was a complete mess. Ye Xiu's sudden comment confused him. I should have gathered all the clubs together and auctioned it off. Ye Xiu's words were terrifying. Ah, Samsara's manager was frightened. Even though this wasn't an easy negotiation, they at least had the advantage over the other clubs. If it really had been auctioned, Samsara's resources weren't any better than any of the other powerhouses. It was hard to say whether they would be able to get it or not if that were the case. What's worse was that for an auction, the winner wasn't necessarily the richest, but who had the courage to stake thousands of pieces of gold in one throw. Samsara's manager couldn't help but think of a powerful opponent. Tyranny. Correct, Tyranny. Club Tyranny was currently the club which was the most willing to spend money. If this guide was auctioned off, it was likely that Tyranny would rely on their great courage and take the guide for themselves. God Ye, how about you give me a price? We can negotiate from there. Samsara's manager wanted to cry. In truth, Ye Xiu felt the same as the manager. He didn't know how much this guide should sell for either. After all, he was just a former pro player. This deal with Samsara would very likely help Samsara win this year's championships. It could also affect their future momentum in the pro scene as well. There were many ways to measure the worth of a character. It wasn't something that could be measured with just a few words. Ye Xiu wasn't sure how high of a price he could sell it for. If he had created this guide all on his own, Ye Xiu wouldn't care too much about selling it for the highest price possible. But the problem was that this guide had been created through the many years of effort of Wei Chen, and then completed through Concealed Light's help. From the start to finish, Ye Xiu hadn't made a single contribution to the guide itself. If he had to split the money, he would only take a very small percentage of it for closing the deal. However, as the person responsible for closing the deal, wasn't it his duty to sell it at the highest price possible? As a result, even though both sides had confirmed their intentions, they still hadn't reached a conclusion. The two of them kept on probing each other for a price all the way until it became dark, but nothing came out of it. The King's Avatar Chapter 634 God Ye, would you like something to eat? Samsara's manager was exhausted as he lay down on the sofa. After hearing his stomach growl a few times, he thought of getting dinner. Oh, sure, Ye Xiu replied indifferently. At the same time, sounds of tapping could be heard. What's this? Samsara's manager suddenly realized something. This was clearly his office. Why am I sitting on the guest's sofa while the guest is sitting in my chair and using my computer? He's using my computer. He's using my computer. Samsara's manager suddenly leapt up. How could his computer be randomly used by an outsider? There were club secrets stored inside. He strode over and went to his computer. When he looked, he almost fainted. The other side wasn't searching for Samsara's secrets. He was using his computer to play Glory. How long has he been playing? Lord Grimm. Oh, you've been famous ever since the 10th server opened. Samsara's manager saw the name and made a comment. Ha ha, thanks, Ye Xiu said. Level 66, Tusk. Leveling truly isn't easy, huh? Samsara's manager said. Lord Grimm was an unspecialized character. He couldn't level past 50 unless it was done in the heavenly domain. As the club's manager, he didn't need to be concerned about these bits of information about the game, but the people in his social circle often talked about things like this. Yeah, it truly isn't easy, Ye Xiu sighed. It looks like another god-level character is about to be born. Samsara's manager remarked. Ha ha, Ye Xiu laughed but didn't deny it. How many skill points does your character have? Samsara's manager suddenly asked. That's a secret. I can't let you know so easily, Ye Xiu replied. Haha, you're already treating us as your opponents, Samsara's manager said. Already haven't I always? Ye Xiu asked. All right, I guess so, Samsara's manager said and then suddenly shifted topics. It looks like you and Excellent Era aren't on good terms anymore. For something as important as this, the first thing you did was contact us instead of contacting Excellent Era. That's not hard to understand, is it? Ye Xiu said. It isn't. Samsara's manager nodded his head. He knew exactly why Ye Xiu would think of Samsara first. If we just keep sitting like this, I feel like we won't ever get anywhere, Samsara's manager said. Be more decisive, give me a price, Ye Xiu said. Why don't you be more decisive? Samsara's manager was gloomy. Because I'm not worried, Ye Xiu said. Fine, Samsara's manager was helpless. Ye Xiu didn't have any other tricks. He was fully utilizing the few advantages that he had. It truly was the mark of a pro-god. How about this? It's quite late. You're probably tired too, so go take rest. I'll give you a definite answer tomorrow. Samsara's manager replied. Like that, ah. Do you have a place to stay? If you don't, we can arrange one for you. Samsara's manager said. No need. I'll come over again tomorrow then, Ye Xiu said as he got up. The two had been in a deadlock for the entire day, but no conclusion had been reached. When Ye Xiu left, Samsara's manager immediately contacted his boss and gave a report about the situation. After receiving the boss's approval, he immediately contacted the various department heads in the club and held a meeting that night. They never set up a meeting time, so once Ye Xiu had gotten enough sleep, he tidied himself up and walked over to the club once more. Chen Guo had arranged the hotel ahead of time, and since she knew that Ye Xiu would be going to Samsara, she obviously picked a hotel close to it. Samsara's manager had been waiting for Ye Xiu to arrive, but he looked quite tired. It seemed like he hadn't slept well the previous night. How are things going? Ye Xiu smiled. He had guessed why the manager had told him he would have a definite answer the next day. The manager must have held a meeting right after he left and thoroughly measured the value of what Ye Xiu had brought. Two things. First, quest list. It shouldn't be a big issue if you only provide us the quest names, right? Second, how you got that drop rate. We still hope that we can see some concrete proof. Sure enough, the manager's efforts yesterday night weren't for naught. Samsara had found a reasonable price for it, but they needed to clarify some things first. The manager's talk with Ye Xiu yesterday afternoon wasn't a waste of time. Samsara's manager understood how he got these 1,000 points of skill books. It was through a manipulation of small details in the quests. Just a list of names shouldn't be an issue, and as long as Samsara knew the names of the quest, they could check their characters to see which quests they had already completed. Then, by knowing the drop rate, they could approximate how many skill points they could obtain. Of course, they would also need some concrete proof of Ye Xiu's supposed drop rates before doing so. All right, Ye Xiu had expected this. Soon afterwards, he took over the manager's computer and opened two files from his email. The first file was how Concealed Light had calculated the drop rate. Ye Xiu didn't understand it, but someone in Samsara probably had the ability to do so and check if it was real or fake. The second file was a list of quest names. After finding these two files, Ye Xiu also gave a requirement. Since you're going to test it, I want to be able to watch them do it. Will that be a problem? Not at all. Samsara's manager didn't object. He printed out the two files. Samsara's manager looked at the data and felt his head hurt. He and Ye Xiu went over to the technology department and handed it over to one of their experts. As for the quest list, he printed out another 11 copies and wrote the name of a Samsara character onto each of them. The 11 Pro account cards had already been prepared for testing. Samsara's employees began checking the quests for each of the characters. This caused a huge commotion in Glory. The message soon reached the ears of the other teams, who heard that Team Samsara had all of their characters wandering around in-game that morning. Their footprints included places in the normal server and heavenly domain. All of the characters stayed on for around the same amount of time too. The playoffs were about to begin. Samsara wasn't busy practicing and instead running to the game to wander around. And it was the entire pro team too. What was going on? The players in-game were talking fervently about it. The pro teams were also at a loss. Team Samsara had a good chance of winning the championships and were naturally formidable opponents. No one dared to underestimate them. What was going on? Because these characters were just wandering around, they didn't follow the same steps. It was hard to see if a character was talking to an NPC, so no one could figure out what they were doing, but their movements couldn't be without any meaning, especially right before the playoffs. Thus, the only possibility was that Samsara's characters were being strengthened. This was a unique aspect of an esports based around an MMO. If a character wanted to be strengthened, they had to do it under the same skies as everyone else. Since Team Samsara's characters had run to the game in such a critical time period, what else could they be doing? However, they couldn't figure out why. These 11 characters didn't even do any quests. The data for the drop rate had been analyzed already. There weren't any problems with it. After verifying which quests had been completed, as well as the drop rate, Samsara could calculate how many skill points they could potentially obtain. Without considering luck and only based on the data, of Samsara's 11 characters, 5 of them could reach 5,000 skill points, while the remaining 6 would be around 4960 points. With good luck, it was obviously possible that all of them or none of them would be able to reach 5,000 skill points. Ye Xiu saw these results but didn't say anything. This was a very good result. Besides not having enough money, Ye Xiu couldn't think of any reason for why Samsara wouldn't buy it. Was it possible for them to figure out how to do the quests through the data for calculating drop rate? Ye Xiu had asked Concealed Light about this, and found out that it wasn't possible. Concealed Light had only been able to come up with this data after going through Wei Chen's experimental data. Without Wei Chen's experimental data, with just this data and the quest names, it wasn't possible to figure out the method for it. If not, Ye Xiu wouldn't dare to hand over this data to them. Wouldn't that be the same thing as handing over the guide? Once the results came out, Samsara's manager and Ye Xiu left the technology department and returned to his office. 15 million RMB. Samsara's manager gave the starting price. The previous test was a double-edged sword. If the results weren't good, Samsara could lower the price, but after confirming everything, Samsara was now at ease. They would get what they paid for. 15 million was without a doubt a buyout price. If it wasn't a buyout, it wouldn't be so expensive. The competitive scene in Glory had developed for several years. Business deals for transferring a character or a player from one team to another were done in the millions. A business deal over 10 million was a first in Glory's history. However, this deal would not be made public. The King's Avatar Chapter 635, TL. Money amounts are in RMB. 1 RMB equals 0.14 USD, 15 million. Ye Xiu had a mini heart attack when he heard this number, but he didn't let his eyebrow twitch even the slightest bit. As a person who was familiar with the professional scene, he obviously knew what this price meant in the Glory circle. As a matter of fact, the development of Glory's professional scene had still been relatively short. When negotiating player transfers from one team to another, they seldom used money. The clubs tended to prefer trades, a pro player for a pro player, a character for a character, or a pro player for a character, a pro player with their character for a powerful character. There were all sorts of ways to deal with such matters. As long as both sides felt that they would not lose out, they traded however they liked. Monetary exchange for a player or character only started to appear in more recent years, once the club started to flourish. This was because many people had come to realize the potential of these clubs in the market, whether it was as an investment or for signing contracts for sponsorships. These gave clubs an increasing amount of profits. This was when clubs began buying and selling with money. So far, the player with the highest transfer price in Glory was Sun Xiang. He had joined Excellent Era for 7 million this season. Character transfers were on a much smaller scale. God characters were all passed down starting from when the club first formed and had never moved from their nests before, so they usually weren't up for trade. There were a few that had been traded in the initial stages of the Glory professional scene, but that was because When the early clubs could no longer continue operating, they had no choice but to sell one of their characters to stay afloat. It was still during the early stages of the scene, and the prices were much lower, so it was insignificant to bring up the prices. Now that the professional scene had stabilized, teams that possessed God-leveled characters wouldn't be weak, let alone nearing the point where they could no longer continue operating, even for a disaster like Excellent Era, who had relegated. Although no one had ever traded God characters, it didn't stop people from discussing their value. As of now, many people saw the glorious battle god One Autumn Leaf as the #1 character in glory. It was generally believed that, if you didn't put up at least 10 million, then the offer wouldn't even be looked at. Apart from this, those who had titles such as the King of Fighting, Sword Saint, or Great Gunner were all top-tier characters of glory, so it was reckoned that they were also worth around 10 million. However, their estimated value remained an estimate. If it really came to the time to trade, everyone would negotiate. In the end, their transferring price might not match up with their market price. Everyone was clear about this point. In any way, everyone only estimated for fun, but those prices also, to a certain point, reflected the character's status in every player's heart. 15 million. It was generally acknowledged in glory that if one offered this amount for any god character, the other side would need to give back change. Was Ye Xiu's skill points for Samsara really worth more than a god-level character? Samsara had been discussing how much these skill points were truly worth all last night. 15 million was what the manager concluded from last night's discussion. He had given the opening price. What would follow next was Ye Xiu's response. As for Ye Xiu, his expression remained unmoving. He was also weighing this number in his mind. He had nothing to measure against for this trade, but with his identity as a god, he had a rough estimate of the price too. If all the characters in the team had an increase in skill points, which skills would they strengthen? What sort of advantages would they gain in the upcoming competition? If there was one more god-level character on the team, what sort of change would that produce? What sort of improvement would it create? The profits made from winning the championships and the attention that god-level characters brought to the team had to be considered. Ye Xiu wasn't sure about how the price of such things were measured, but in terms of an increase in competitive strength, Ye Xiu was an absolute expert. If it was only these few, Ye Xiu felt that 15 million was a good price. So Ye Xiu nodded. Just when the manager let out a breath, Ye Xiu spoke. 15 million, you're not buying it outright. The manager of Samsara was just about to relax and take a sip of tea, but ended up spitting it back into his cup. He nearly spat 2 mouthfuls of blood into the cup as well. Are you kidding me? Samsara's manager was getting anxious. You could negotiate nicely if you wanted to raise the price. How could you say that this price isn't worth buying it out? That was simply robbery. I think that it's still too little for a complete buy it out. Ye Xiu spoke unhurriedly. The manager of Samsara realized that he lost his composure just then, so he calmed down and placed away the teacup and said, "Then what is your price?" 30 million, Ye Xiu said. If they weren't familiar with each other, Samsara's manager would have kicked him out of the place. Last night, they had conducted an all-night meeting and carried out a complete check on how they could benefit from this trade. After considering the benefits and risks, 30 million would only be considered if it were absolutely guaranteed. What was an absolute guarantee? If they bought it with a 100% chance of winning the championships, then 30 million was definitely an acceptable price. That kind of guarantee wasn't possible, so 30 million was also impossible. Come on, God Yi, let's go over this together, Samsara's manager said. He was determined to clearly reveal to Ye Xiu what 30 million stood for, so this bluffing guy would feel ashamed. However, Ye Xiu didn't intend to hear his explanation. He only sighed with regret. What, is that no good? Of course not. Samsara's manager spoke without needing to think. This thing won't guarantee that we will win the championships. And even though the data is real, it still depends on luck. What if we have really bad luck and fail to receive any skill books even after clearing all the tasks? Even 15,000 would be a loss, let alone 15 million. How could you say such unlucky words? Are you a spy? Ye Xiu said. I was just giving an example. Samsara's manager didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Fine, that was a bit too extreme. Then let's say that our skill points go up similar to what you showed us previously. I'm sure you're very clear as to how much that would improve the team's strength. If we take that improvement and convert it to what would be required in character trades, what would that amount be? If you're not too sure about the current market, I can show you, for example. All right, you don't have to tell me. I have to admit 30 million was a joke, Ye Xiu said. Samsara's manager was just about to let out a sigh of relief when Ye Xiu continued on with his sentence. But you also have to admit 15 million is also a joke. How can 15 million be a joke? The manager for Samsara was anxious. I'll show you the calculations. Why are you always trying to calculate? Did you spend all of last night calculating this? Ye Xiu said. Samsara's manager was startled. He hadn't needed to say it out loud, but they actually did spend the whole of last night calculating this. We're professionals in this industry, no. If we really were to figure out who's right and wrong, do you really think 15 million is actually reasonable? How is it not reasonable? Samsara's manager said worriedly. 22 million, Ye Xiu said. What? Samsara's manager was startled. If both 30 million and 15 million are considered as a joke, then take the middle, which would be 22.5 million, but since I'm a generous person, I'll let you keep 0.5 million, which makes it 22 million, Ye Xiu said. You're saying that 22 million is more reasonable, the manager asked. You don't think it's reasonable, Ye Xiu asked. Not at all, the manager said. Why don't we find someone else to evaluate this for us? Ye Xiu suggested. Find someone else to evaluate this. For example, tyranny, blue rain, or tiny herb, Ye Xiu said. The manager was starting to panic. He was very annoyed at Ye Xiu's pressure and needed to dispute a bit more. Each team has their own situation. They might have cleared all the tasks for their characters in the team, so if you take that to them, it might not be worth a penny at all. Worth less than a penny? Are you kidding me? Keeping the other teams from using this couldn't be worth less than a penny. Anyone would buy it out. No matter what, buying this out would only bring you benefit and no harm. Take you guys as an example. Do you guys need the skill points? No, what you guys need is an advantage. Buying this out would automatically give you an advantage. For this, you would naturally need to give more, Ye Xiu said. 22 million is too much, the manager said. Then what do you think? Ye Xiu asked. 18 million. The manager was finally letting go of the price for 15 million. 21 million, Ye Xiu said. Do you have any point in doing this? The manager didn't know whether to cry or laugh. This was a big trade we're talking about. Could we not bargain bit by bit like how you would at a flea market? Every little bit was in the millions. If you wanted to change the price, you have to give a reason. If there wasn't a solid reason, who would be willing to give away a few million? Fine, 20 million. I know this is an acceptable price for you, Ye Xiu said. 20 million. The manager was a little gloomy. In actual fact, 20 million was a sum that matched their calculations, but no one would reveal their upper limit right at the start. They had to start with a lower price, so they decided on 15 million. In terms of the negotiation, the manager originally had quite a lot of confidence. This was because he thought that Ye Xiu would only be clear about how much the skill points could improve their team's strength. In terms of the other benefits produced by the result of the upgrade, even a manager like him couldn't simply weigh it all out, let alone a former pro player like Ye Xiu. He thought that if he explained it to Ye Xiu, he would easily convince the latter into thinking that 15 million was a reasonable price. Even if it didn't work, he could handle with an addition of 1 or 2 million. Who would have thought that Ye Xiu would refuse to listen to his explanation and only argue about 15 million being too little? Ye Xiu had even threatened him with 30 million and the other teams. The manager wasn't useless. He could tell that Ye Xiu himself wasn't too sure what the amount should be and how to measure it either. He must have realized instinctively that 15 million must have been lower than their bottom line, so he found reasons to lift the price up. He was daring and wasn't afraid of making a fool of himself. He rose the price violently, treating the 15 million like 15 yuan, and just multiplied it by 2. The manager's face was filled with tears. He felt like he had lost in terms of being too reserved and lenient. Why didn't he just shamelessly offer 5 million in the beginning? 20 million. Then let's make it 20 million. The manager nodded helplessly. The King's Avatar Chapter 636. Samsara agreed on 20 million. However, Samsara's manager had a request. The 20 million wouldn't be paid all at once. 5 million would be paid in advance, while the other 15 million would be paid monthly over 24 months. The total number seemed to be fixed, but there could still be ways around it. Ye Xiu had to try and fight for it. With the number already agreed upon, the two sides were much more relaxed. You give in a little bit, I give in a little bit, and so on. In the end, Ye Xiu was able to get 8 million in advance and 12 million paid monthly over the next 12 months. After the negotiation finished, Ye Xiu suddenly had an idea. He asked if he could use a portion of the money to be paid in materials from the game. Samsara's manager brightened up at this proposal, but when Ye Xiu listed his requirements, the manager shook his head. No way. If it were normal materials, perhaps they could discuss it, but nearly all of the materials that Ye Xiu had asked for were only dropped from wild bosses. If these materials could be bought, Samsara's manager would have easily spent that 20 million to buy what they could. The only reason that they would sell their materials would be if Samsara lost their ambition to win the championships. But with Samsara's current momentum and resolve, how was that a possibility? So when he heard Ye Xiu's proposal, the manager immediately rejected it. When the manager proposed enormous amounts of materials that could be found in dungeons, Ye Xiu also refused. He shook his head just like what Samsara's manager had done towards his proposal. One was a manager, one was a pro player. Neither of them were stupid. Both of them knew that the value of dungeon materials and wild boss materials were on a completely different scale. Dungeon materials could be easily bought if one had money, but wild boss materials were difficult to buy even if one had the money for it. This negotiation was different from before. Previously, Ye Xiu had something that Samsara needed, so he had the advantage. With the overall deal finished, small arguments over minor details wouldn't stop the deal from being renegotiated, so most parties would slowly discuss the following matters. Samsara didn't have the time, though. After buying the method, they needed to immediately use it and upgrade their characters. They didn't have much time left until the playoffs, so the manager didn't dare delay any longer over small details. From his observations, when Ye Xiu had rejected the dungeon materials, Ye Xiu had shook his head, but he hadn't been too resolute. So after talking about it for a while, the two sides began figuring out how to trade the materials for money. They obviously wouldn't be going according to market price. Ye Xiu tried to lower the price, while Samsara's manager naturally wanted to raise the price. The manager talked about all sorts of troubles that Samsara was going through. He sounded as if they would be out on the streets if they went with Ye Xiu's prices. Ye Xiu obviously wouldn't trust him. He hard-heartedly fought back, occasionally reminding the manager that Samsara was busy and didn't have time. If not, He would threaten the manager by asking about the storages for tyranny, blue rain, tiny herb, etc., and ask whether or not they might take the offer. Samsara's manager listened to him. Ye Xiu was being so shameless. The two sides had already agreed on the deal, but they hadn't officially signed anything yet, so he was playing the back-out card. Ye Xiu was saying it to his face too. Shouldn't he feel embarrassed? However, Samsara's manager had a certain amount of confidence in this deal for materials. Don't look at how Ye Xiu was constantly telling them that they needed to hurry. The manager also knew that Ye Xiu was in a hurry too. Since he planned on building a team from scratch, he needed materials very badly. They wouldn't be able to enter the pro scene with a bunch of purple and orange equipment. Wild boss materials couldn't be bought, but researching self-made equipment also required lots of dungeon materials. Even though dungeon materials could be readily bought with money, Samsara's manager was certain that as long as they gave a price lower than the usual market price, Ye Xiu would be tempted. The manager's analysis was correct. After going back and forth for a while, Ye Xiu didn't continue to persist. He also knew that if he traded dungeon materials in this deal, he would be saving a lot of money in the future. As for whether or not these materials would have a lower value in the future, Ye Xiu didn't care. His job wasn't to invest in the material market. After taking these materials, he would be using them, and he needed to use them immediately. There was no time to wait for the prices to rise or fall. In the end, Ye Xiu and Samsara's manager agreed upon a trade of 2 million RMB for dungeon materials. Ye Xiu gave a call and had Wei Chen send them a copy of their needs, whether it was for his death hand or other self-made equipment requirements. The copy that Wei Chen sent over also had wild boss materials, but Samsara wouldn't budge on this point. Ye Xiu could only erase them. Because it was just for dungeon materials, the amount of materials traded for 2 million RMB wouldn't be a small amount. After talking about it for a while, they finally reached a deal. The exact amount of money wasn't definite yet, but Ye Xiu had gathered together his requirements. After giving the list of materials over to Samsara's manager, the manager handed it over to the specialists, who gave an estimate for the materials according the manager's prices. After doing some rounding, they finalized the amount that they would receive for 2 million. When Ye Xiu saw these huge quantities of materials being traded without Samsara even blinking an eye, Ye Xiu was inwardly surprised at Samsara's resources. Their explosive growth this season wasn't without reason. The other details took another half-day to finalize. That night, the two sides drew up a contract and signed their names. Once Samsara arranged to transfer over the advance, Ye Xiu finally relaxed. He downloaded the guide from his email and handed it to Samsara. Tusk. Samsara's manager personally inspected the goods to make sure that the quest list Ye Xiu had given them was the same as in this document. When he saw that they had spent 20 million for this document, the manager sighed repeatedly. After inspecting the list, he had the specialists verify the content with the drop rate data that Ye Xiu had provided beforehand. This wasn't an easy task, but it was necessary. The contract had a stipulation, meaning that if the guide didn't match the drop rate data provided, Samsara had the right to adjust the price accordingly. Because of this clause, Ye Xiu couldn't help but feel nervous, waiting for the confirmation. If Concealed Light had made a silly mistake and somehow messed up a digit or two, it could be troublesome, but when he thought of Concealed Light's diligence, he managed to calm himself down a bit. This examination took place all night. Samsara's manager deserved to be in the gaming industry. He didn't have any problem staying up all night with Ye Xiu to watch over it. Finally, at 4:37 a.m., the data verification was completed. There were no mistakes. Samsara's manager shook Ye Xiu's hand. The largest deal in the history of Glory had officially concluded. It was only a pity that this deal wouldn't be announced to the public. From here on out, Samsara had full authority to do what they wanted with the guide. If Ye Xiu wanted to use it, he would need Samsara's permission too. Of course, Ye Xiu had guaranteed that it wouldn't restrict their team's strength. He had stressed this, and Samsara also understood, so they didn't have any overly excessive demands. They just made sure that Ye Xiu would not be able to sell this method to anyone else. It's been a long day. Let's get some rest. Come over tomorrow afternoon. We should host a feast for you. All of the issues had been resolved. Samsara's manager naturally loosened up. He didn't immediately kick Ye Xiu and instead maintained his cordiality. There's no need for that. I've got to hurry and return as well. I will have to come back anyways sooner or later, Ye Xiu said. Ha ha, that's true. I hope that time comes soon. Samsara's manager said. I'll see you then. You don't want to stay for dinner. No need. Ye Xiu waved his hands and left Samsara. When he walked out of the elevator and turned around to look back, there were quite a few rooms still lit. Ye Xiu reckoned that Samsara would be staying up all night to upgrade their characters. When Samsara's players woke up, they would have characters with skill points unrivaled in the alliance. Seeing how Samsara was spending the night working, he guessed that knowledge of the guide wouldn't be passed down to the pro players. After all, pro players moved teams. Even if they signed a non-disclosure agreement, it was still another potential source of uncertainty. It would be better to simply keep the knowledge from spreading to as little people as possible. As for what Samsara was planning on doing with this in the future, Ye Xiu didn't know either, but he was certain that Samsara was well aware of the issues with this guide. The reason that they bought it out was for their goal of becoming champions. Ye Xiu didn't think that Samsara would use this guide as a money-making tool. Only studios would think of using it for profit. The clubs were at the top in terms of making money. Those below them were making far less too. A player or character transfer easily went into the millions, and with how fast the scene was growing, it wouldn't be long until it broke into the tens of millions. The characters in the alliance relied on the existence of the game, but because of the alliance, the value of these characters far surpassed those of normal game accounts. The Glory Alliance was a brand name even higher than the game itself. When Ye Xiu returned to the hotel, he bought a plane ticket home. That night, Ye Xiu returned to Happy Internet Cafe. He went to the practice room and saw everyone gathered there. Seeing Ye Xiu return, everyone quieted down. How much money did we get? Wei Chen's voice was dry and rough. Ye Xiu had been in touch with them these past 2 days. They obviously wanted to know the results, but Ye Xiu wouldn't tell them. This was because the deal hadn't been completely closed yet, so Ye Xiu didn't want to get their hopes up. In order to prevent them from having their worlds turn from heaven to hell, Ye Xiu had kept it a secret. He would finally reveal the price to them now. The King's Avatar Chapter 637 TL. Money is in RMB. 6.9 RMB. 1 USD. The practice room was silent. No one ever thought that they could ever have too much money, even someone like Steamed Bun. Everyone looked nervously at Ye Xiu in anticipation. Ye Xiu slowly poured himself a cup of water to drink, took a sip, then grabbed a cigarette from his pocket and slowly lit it. If you don't spit out the answer, I'm going to kill you. Wei Chen had been anxious all day. When Ye Xiu finally returned, he kept on stalling. How could Wei Chen not be furious? 2 million worth in materials. Ye Xiu calmly answered. 2 million materials. Wei Chen's face twisted in disgust. To put it plainly, did Ye Xiu even have the right to split the earnings? Of course not. This was considered Wei Chen's goods. Concealed Light would have a much greater split of the earnings than Ye Xiu. All Ye Xiu did was run errands. It would be nice of Wei Chen to even give him a share. Wei Chen obviously wasn't planning on keeping the money for himself. However, it seemed like Ye Xiu only cared about himself and traded his years of effort for a bunch of materials. It was clearly for the team to use, but Wei Chen still didn't feel comfortable. Even though Ye Xiu had contacted him asking about what materials he needed, He had expected something like this, but he didn't think Ye Xiu would be so aggressive. 2 million. In materials. Even Chen Guo felt Ye Xiu had been too excessive when she heard Ye Xiu's response. This guy seemed to take Wei Chen's things as his own and only thought about his own interests. If it was just a small amount, it didn't matter, but this was 2 million they were talking about. But things had already gotten to this point. Wei Chen was a grand person. 2 million, in the end he laughed. Ha, that much material should be more than enough for us to use. Enough my ass, they're all dungeon materials. They refuse to give us any wild boss materials. Ye Xiu said. FCK, just because they won't give any doesn't mean they won't sell any. What the FCK were you doing? Wei Chen heard this. He had a hard time enduring it any longer. They spent 2 million but didn't even get any of the materials he urgently needed. Ye Xiu had done a real SHT job this time. Sigh. What could he do though? Wei Chen could only sigh. He had given Ye Xiu full authority to settle this deal and he was very unhappy with the results, but he felt bad saying anything. In the end, he could only sigh with regret. Chen Guo couldn't stand it any longer and was ready to ask a few questions. Was he planning on selling these materials for money? He wasn't going to use all of the materials, right? Even though Chen Guo didn't call Ye Xiu out for being so despicable, she didn't feel happy either at only getting materials. Apart from materials, they're also paying us 6 million in advance. Ye Xiu said indifferently. What? Wei Chen had been shaken up by the results, but after hearing this piece of news, he suddenly became excited again. Chen Guo, who had also been about to say something, froze. She heard it clearly and didn't need Ye Xiu to repeat it. She suddenly felt gratified. Ye Xiu hadn't just gotten materials. 6 million. You really are quite capable. Wei Chen grinned widely and gave Ye Xiu a strong slap on the back. At this moment, Tang Ru noticed the words that Ye Xiu had specifically used. 6 million is just the advance. Wei Chen stared blankly. 6 million was already enough to make his head spin. There was still more to it. Wei Chen stumbled backwards and held himself up using the table. He was afraid he would faint. Yeah, there's also another 12 million that will be paid monthly over the next year. That's it. Ye Xiu finally took out the contract. Wei Chen grabbed it and flipped through it madly. He didn't care about all the clauses and whatnot. He just kept on flipping it while mumbling. Where? Where does it talk about the money? Wei Chen wanted to verify that this number was correct. Ye Xiu had drawn up the contract line by line with samsara, so he was obviously very familiar with it. He went over and found the line talking about the payment. Wei Chen's eyes sparkled when he saw the startling number. He yelled out, "Oh my God, FCK me," and went back to collapse in his seat. Chen Guo, Tang Ru, and even Steamed Bun were shocked. 2 million in materials, 6 million down payment, and another 12 million paid over the coming year. The total value was 20 million. They knew that the guide would be bought for a considerable amount of money, but who would have thought that it would be such a large amount? Chen Guo kept up with the competitive scene and had previously been an excellent era fan. Sun Xiang's transfer for 7 million had been the highest ever seen in glory, but now, this guide was worth almost 3 times as much as a god. Chen Guo couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. In any case, as long as it was better than excellent era, Chen Guo would be happy. A bigger number making her happy was a mark of her mentality as a fan. As a team manager, whether it was spending or earning money, it was all a business strategy. There was nothing to be so excited about. In 2 days, the down payment should arrive. Starting from next month, they'll be paying us 1 million every month. The money will be transferred directly to your bank account. Okay, have you got any more questions? Ye Xiu said. Ha 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 ha. Wei Chen laughed wildly as he continually patted Ye Xiu's shoulder. This guy's already gone crazy. Ye Xiu hastily ran away. Chen Guo felt gratified too. Such an insane deal was definitely something to be satisfied with. As for how Wei Chen was planning on splitting the money, no one had the right to ask. If he wanted to invest in the team, that would obviously be great. If he didn't want to, they didn't have any right to say anything. Chen Guo could only remind him that he shouldn't forget about concealed light. If concealed light hadn't helped, would they have been able to get this deal? Ye Xiu also agreed. If they didn't have concealed light's precise drop rate data, even selling it would have been an issue in and of itself. After all, Wei Chen's previous data had been a complete mess. If they had given it to Samsara to look at, Samsara would ask what the drop rate was, and he wouldn't even be able to give a definite answer. When Samsara had inspected the goods for their exact value, if it was Wei Chen's original data, it wouldn't even be possible to test it. If Samsara couldn't verify the value, it meant that there was an unknown risk and the price would certainly be much, much lower. Of course, Wei Chen showed his spirit of loyalty. Even though he acted shameless, he would never act in such a way for important business. 20 million. Concealed light wasn't an internationally renowned mathematician. Why would he refuse? Wei Chen messaged concealed light in the group chat. At this moment, Steamed Bun came over, sized up Wei Chen, and commented, "Who would have thought old Wei was so smart, to think you could casually earn so much money?" Ha 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 ha, Wei Chen laughed madly. "In the future, I won't fight over who will pay the bill," Steamed Bun expressed. "Who's going to fight for it? I'll pay," Wei Chen replied magnanimously. At this moment, Concealed Light replied. He saw that it wasn't Ye Xiu but another team member. Concealed Light was surprised and carefully greeted Wei Chen. "Scientist, thank you very much. That guide sold for 20 million. Tell me, how much do you want?" Wei Chen said. "Oh, that much? Amazing," Concealed Light replied. Because they were talking online, they couldn't tell if he was excited or not from his words. "Without you, we wouldn't have gotten so much," Wei Chen said. "No way, I didn't do anything. I just organized everything," Concealed Light said. The two talked for a while, but it seemed like Concealed Light didn't care about the 20 million and insisted that he didn't contribute anything to the guide, so he didn't have the right to any of the money. After talking back and forth, Concealed Light refused to budge. Wei Chen couldn't do anything about it. He wanted to give Concealed Light money. Shouldn't that be an easy thing to do? It was a huge number, like 20 million too. Even if it was just 1%, 200,000 was still a good amount of money. This scientist is so enlightened. Wei Chen couldn't persuade Concealed Light. Later, Concealed Light explained that he should tell his professor about it and see what his professor said. No one had any objections, of course. Soon afterwards, Concealed Light went offline. That night, Wei Chen didn't go back to the apartments to rest. He stayed up all night in the practice room. He was too excited to sleep. The next day, Concealed Light came back. He had asked Professor Zhang, who said he didn't need any money. He didn't seem to care that he had helped them earn such a huge sum of money. He just hoped that Wei Chen would use this money appropriately. Use it appropriately. Wei Chen studied Professor Zhang's words and asked everyone, "Is he telling me to use it to help run the team?" FCK. There was no saving him. Professor Zhang clearly wasn't talking about funding a professional gaming team when he said to use it appropriately. Innovation. The advancement of mankind. Everyone reminded him that this was what Professor Zhang meant. Wei Chen heard their responses and froze. He never imagined that he would ever do anything related to innovation or the advancement of mankind. How was he supposed to do that? Wei Chen felt vexed. It seemed like he was about to have another night of insomnia. Ye Xiu sighed. "Don't think about it from a scholar's perspective. Just do what you think is appropriate. He just hopes that you don't waste your money on worthless things." The King's Avatar, Chapter 638. Wei Chen glanced at Ye Xiu. Wasn't Ye Xiu basically telling him to use the money to finance the team? How shameless, but then again, he would just be making a fool of himself if he attempted to get into things like innovation or the advancement of humanity. Helping the team had been his original intention all along. This time, he would be financing his dream, so Wei Chen would happily to do so. We need to hurry and improve the strength of our characters right now. Wei Chen cleared his throat and spoke. With the money in his pockets, his tone of voice became much brighter. He acted like he was some great sage, completely different from his usual hoodlum self. "Oh, how do you say we improve them?" Ye Xiu asked. "Equipment. What else?" Wei Chen said. "Doesn't that require materials? 2 million worth of materials isn't enough for you?" Ye Xiu asked. Such a large amount of dungeon materials was more than enough for their team to use. They hadn't received these materials yet, though, because they were still individual players in the heavenly domain. They didn't even have the ability to receive these materials. The materials in Samsara were stored in their guild storage, not carried by individual characters. All of these dungeon materials were more than enough to use for improving their current equipment. "You didn't get any wild boss materials. What's the point?" Wei Chen hadn't slept last night. He had carefully looked over the contract. There wasn't anything rare in those 2 million worth of materials. For self-made equipment, the higher the level, the more stringent the requirement for the materials would be. Even if one could find dungeon materials to replace the rarer materials, the creator wouldn't be happy to do so. Different materials might be able to form a self-made equipment, but how much would it affect its stats? The shape of the equipment was crucial, but the stats were the most important. It's similar to building a PC. The PC will have a CPU, RAM, hard disk, video graphics card, but there were differences in quality. A PC made with higher-end components would certainly perform better than one with lower-end components. Self-made equipment strived for the best stats. If one used low-grade materials to create a piece of equipment with the stats of an orange equipment, what was the point? Using these materials to replace higher-end material was just a way to save on costs, but some things just couldn't be replaced. And this was just based on the upgrade process alone. When the equipment needed to be upgraded to level 70, if the conditions permitted it, it was best to completely use uncommon materials to create the equipment. Only then would the stats be at the peak. If one didn't use uncommon materials, the equipment created wouldn't be considered truly self-made equipment. "Can you get uncommon materials even if you have money?" Ye Xiu asked in return. Wei Chen couldn't answer him. There were very few uncommon materials amongst the normal player base. Even studios couldn't compete with the clubs. Uncommon materials were completely monopolized by clubs, and as a core component of self-made equipment, as long as the club wasn't about to go bankrupt, no club would ever sell them. Even if they weren't going to use the material, they could still use it to trade for other uncommon materials. When a team dissolved, their storage would be thoroughly cleaned out. However, these sort of dissolved guilds wouldn't have many materials to begin with anyways. In addition, the other clubs would have swarmed over to buy the materials first. Ye Xiu and the others would never even get the chance to buy them. They had money, but this money couldn't be used to buy uncommon materials. Of course, if you put up a high enough price like 10 million for material, no club would refuse, but who would be so wasteful? Their need for dungeon materials had been met, but the crucial uncommon material still had to be obtained through the game. "Little Tang, steamed bun, try and enter the heavenly domain as soon as you can. Once you do that, finish the rest of those quests," Ye Xiu said. "What, are you afraid Samsara is going to pull some sort of trick?" Wei Chen noticed. "Just in case," Ye Xiu said. "Didn't you say that with a foundation like Samsara's, the game company won't be able to figure out the reason?" Chen Gu said. "But what if they intentionally revealed it to the game company to establish their advantage?" Ye Xiu said. Everyone was startled. For Samsara, the most important thing is to maintain their advantage over all the other teams. They aren't going to use the guide to make money, so once they use it, they'll throw it away. That would be the safest way to ensure they maintain their advantage. From then on, no one else will have this guide to improve their skill points, and they would keep their advantage in skill points until who knows how long, Ye Xiu said. Even though they have restrictions set in the contract, this sort of thing isn't too easy to control, so just in case, we should hurry and get as many of those skill points as we can, Ye Xiu said. Why didn't you say so earlier? Chen Guo panicked and hastily urged Tang Ru and Steamed Bun to step it up. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun weren't max leveled yet, but with their skill, they shouldn't have any difficulty finishing the Heavenly Domain challenge. After all, their skill far surpassed normal players. Even if they somehow weren't able to complete it, wasn't Ye Xiu there? He could finish it at level 50 and he wouldn't have any problems finishing it for them if they were incapable. When the two heard Ye Xiu's words, they also began to hurry. Tang Ru had taken the quest chain at level 50, but she had trouble completing it at that time, so she decided to put it on hold. Afterwards, as she leveled up, she went back to the quest chain and had finished the majority of it already. Steamed Bun hadn't received the quest originally, but when she saw that Tang Ru was already doing it before she was level 70, he also learned from her and occasionally completed parts of the quest chain. However, Steamed Bun's progress wasn't as smooth as Tang Ru's. In a few places that required precision, it wasn't that Steamed Bun couldn't do it, but rather, he always wanted to try to succeed in some sort of weird way, which always resulted in failure. As a result, Ye Xiu supervised and urged Steamed Bun to hurry and finish the quest chain. Tang Ru focused and finished the quest chain that day. Following after Ye Xiu's Lord Grim and Kaio Yifen's 1-inch Ash, there were now 3 characters from the 10th server in the Heavenly Domain. Afterwards, she went to do the skill point quests that she hadn't done yet in the Heavenly Domain. After receiving a quest, she completed it and received a skill book, which meant that Samsara hadn't pulled a dirty trick just yet. It had only been a day or two. No matter how fast Samsara was, they couldn't be that fast. The game company might not decide to change the quests, even after knowing about this skill point farming method. Let alone Samsara, even the Alliance could only communicate with the game company. They didn't have any way of forcing them to do anything if they didn't want to do it. More often than not, the Alliance had to adapt to whatever changes the game made. That night, another 5,000 skill point character was birthed from Happy Internet Cafe. According to Concealed Light's data, of the 1650 skill points possible, a character would get around 965 skill points on average. From this number, Ye Xiu's and Tang Ru's luck were already extremely good. They hadn't even finished all of the quests yet, and they already received 1,000 skill points. Wei Chen didn't stay idle. His Windward formation had finished all of those quests, but didn't he still have a Warlock account on hand? However, this account had been obtained along with Unrivaled Super Hottie when Ye Xiu won the wager. The skill points were very average, 4210 points. Wei Chen had run quests all night. Quests already completed couldn't be done again. In the end, he ended up with a total of 4480 skill points. This was pretty good for normal players, but for them, Wei Chen's efforts were for nothing. What do I do? Do I buy 100 Warlock accounts? Wei Chen was starting to panic. Windward formation had 4920 skill points, but it wasn't good enough. Now that he was rich, he started with an estimate of 100 accounts. 100, 1,000 wouldn't even be enough. These are normal accounts. Do you think all of them have the same base stats as a pro characters? Ye Xiu said. It looks like I'll have to specially order a few, but what if the accounts come out and the quests are wasted? Wei Chen was worried. 4920 skill points isn't bad. Even Samsara won't have all of their characters maxed with 5,000 skill points. Ye Xiu said. No, I refuse. Let me think. Wei Chen hadn't slept the previous night and had been focusing hard the entire day, but he was still full of energy. Tang Ru was done, and it was just a matter of time before Steamed Bun finished as well, But there was also concealed light and little cold hands. Concealed light's issue lay in his mechanics. He wouldn't be able to reach the heavenly domain in a short amount of time either. There were also a few places in the guide which required a certain level of mechanics too. It would be a waste if concealed light didn't get the same treatment. With no other choice, Ye Xiu took concealed light's account card and completed it for him. As for little cold hands, they had only been in touch with him for a short amount of time. The trust between them was still extremely limited, so he didn't feel confident in showing the guide over to little cold hands. Even more so, little cold hands was an old account. If he had finished all of the quests before, he wouldn't be able to receive any skill points. Would his account be like Wei Chen's or Chen Yu's accounts and only be able to get around max out at 4,500 skill points? That was far from being good enough to compete with the pros. Just thinking about it wouldn't get anything done. Ye Xiu contacted Little Cold Hands on QQ. Little Cold Hands had 4,170 skill points. As expected, it was only a normal account. As for which quests he had done before, Little Cold Hands was an account that had been gifted to him, so he didn't know either. With no other choice, Ye Xiu gave the handed over a list of quests to him too and have him check which quests he had done before. If he hadn't, then he shouldn't touch them for now. It's very important, please hurry and check, Ye Xiu said. What's so special about these quests? Little Cold Hands wasn't like Steamed Bun, who wouldn't think to ask before doing something. It has to do with improving your character's strength, but it requires a special method, so I need to make sure your character hasn't done all of these quests already. Ye Xiu explained the King's Avatar Chapter 639. By improving strength, are you referring to skill books? As expected, Little Cold Hands wasn't Steamed Bun. It wasn't hard to arrive at this answer. He was a max-leveled character. If he wanted to strengthen his character, there were only two ways: skill points and equipment. Ye Xiu had just asked him about his character's skill points, and now he wanted him to do some seemingly random quests. It was only to be expected that he would put two and two together. Yes, first, verify which quests you've already completed. Ye Xiu didn't hide it. Even though they weren't too familiar with one another, Little Cold Hands would still be a member of their future team. It wouldn't be good to treat him like a complete outsider. Sure, give me a moment to check, Little Cold Hands replied. As a result, the team began to hurry and improve their skill points as if they were participating in the upcoming playoffs as well. After Little Cold Hands circled around the heavenly domain and the normal server, he reported the results to Ye Xiu. His luck was quite good. Little Cold Hands hadn't done many of the quests yet. Of the total 1650 skill points possible, he still had 1220 skill points that he could potentially obtain. His character only needed 830 skill points to max out, so if his luck was good, he just might be able to do it. This type of normal account made Chen Guo very envious. Her chasing haze had completed most of these quests already, so she hadn't gained much from the guide. However, Chen Guo had created a new account in the new server earlier and made sure to leave all of these quests open. But with the quest guide being bought out by Samsara, by the time her new chasing haze reached the heavenly domain, it was hard to say if she would still be able to utilize the guide. Chen Guo was upset. She only regretted that she hadn't spent enough time on the new server account to level this account faster. That's pretty good. You have a lot of quests still available. If it's okay with you, could you leave this account with me? I'll help you finish these quests, Ye Xiu said. I can't do them myself. It requires a special method, Ye Xiu said. Little Cold Hands didn't ask any further questions. Ye Xiu had expected this to happen because the other side was an astute person who had certainly realized that this method couldn't easily be given away. Little Cold Hands wasn't just astute either. He was also smart. Ye Xiu trusted that little cold hands wouldn't blame him for not giving him the guide to see. The question was whether or not little cold hands was willing to entrust him with his own account. It had to be known that this guy had initially suspected Ye Xiu of trying to swindle him. Ye Xiu hadn't asked him for anything like a cash deposit, but the first thing he asked him to do was send over his account card. It seemed very much like a scam. "Are you in a hurry?" Sure enough, little cold hands was a bit hesitant. "The faster the better," Ye Xiu replied. Little cold hands left this message and then became silent. The conversation had been conducted in the group chat, so everyone else saw it too. Apart from Steamed Bun, everyone could tell little cold hands' misgivings. Thus, Wei Chen suddenly spoke impatiently. "Stop wasting time. How much could your account possibly be worth? I'll give you a down payment." Wei Chen's wealth was considerable right now, and he had no qualms using it. "Oh, if that's the case, how about 2,000? Little cold hands actually gave a number. His account was very average, but it was still a member of tyrannical ambition. Amidst the normal player base, it wouldn't be considered too bad. "FCK, you actually dared." Wei Chen was surprised. "What?" Little cold hands asked in doubt. Wei Chen was speechless. When he said he would give a down payment, according to Wei Chen's understanding, the other side would usually be too embarrassed to ask for the money and would just happily send over the account card. It turns out he had met someone on a completely different wavelength than himself. The other side immediately answered back and actually gave a price. But since things had already reached such a stage, Wei Chen felt awkward, but he couldn't back out, could he? Plus, after having received 20 million, 2,000 was nothing to him. "All right, send me your bank account info." Wei Chen didn't say anything more. Little cold hands didn't hesitate and sent over his bank account info. "Check your account tomorrow," Wei Chen coldly said and turned his head towards Ye Xiu. "I don't like this guy." Not many people would like what little cold hands had just done. Even Chen Guo wasn't happy. Although they didn't trust little cold hands and didn't send him a copy of the guide, the difference between their exchanges were completely different. Chen Guo was certain that if it were anyone else in little cold hands' position, they wouldn't have done the same thing that little cold hands had done. Thinking about it in this way, Chen Guo felt more comfortable looking at little cold hands with disdain and began expressing her discontent with Wei Chen. In any case, they were now busy attending to improving these characters. As the days passed, the start of the playoffs finally arrived. Blue Rain, Samsara, Tiny Herb, Tyranny, Misty Rain, Void, Thunderclap 301. These were their final placings in the regular season. The seedings for the playoffs were decided by these placings: 1st versus 8th, 2nd versus 7th, 3rd versus 6th, 4th versus 5th. This was also the order of the matches. Blue Rain versus 301. Samsara versus Thunderclap. Tiny Herb versus Void. Tyranny versus Misty Rain. 4 matches would be conducted across the span of 4 days. To make it easier to stream the matches would take place separate from one another. The matches would cycle between the home arenas of the 2 teams to give equal opportunities for each team to share the profit for the revenue generated by playoff tickets. Thus, the first round of the playoffs would take 8 days total. In the second round, the 4 teams that won would move on and finish another 4 matches in 4 days. The finals would be 2 matches over 4 days as well. Because the matches would take place at different arenas, the players had to move around, so they didn't want them to become too tired. The competition format was the same as before: an individual competition, group competition, and a team competition. The total points in the home and away matches would be added up. Because there had to be a winner when totaling up the points, there would be a few subtle differences than they had in calculations during the regular season. The start of the playoffs received a large amount of attention from Glory players, so it usually started on a Saturday. But because many watched the matches, Many of them would hold off on playing the game during that time, which affected the number of people playing the game. For the match on the first day, Blue Rain versus 301, everything went as expected. Blue Rain had a huge lead. With such a huge gap in skill and placing, it was unrealistic for 301 to catch up to Blue Rain in their own home arena. Blue Rain's performance immediately drew comments such as, "killed the competition." Such a quick victory made it seem like the playoffs would not be suspenseful, making people looking for a profit not as happy. But for the team, having such a large lead early on was a good thing. For the match on the second day, Samsara versus Thunderclap, a lot of people were looking for an upset. Samsara had gained more and more momentum as the season went on. When the playoffs arrived, Samsara was believed to have the greatest chances of winning. Naturally, a lot of people didn't want this to happen and were waiting to see them fail. Despite not having an incredible ace player, but one of the master tacticians, Xiao Shikin, leading them instead, Team Thunderclap was often a team that gave powerhouses a lot of trouble. But the results made them disappointed. Samsara maintained their usual dominance after the All-Star weekend and crushed Team Thunderclap in their home arena. This result made many surprised. Even if Thunderclap lost with Xiao Shikin's tactics, they shouldn't have lost so badly. Everyone in Happy Internet Cafe paid more attention to this match than the first match. They naturally wanted to see how much of a difference the skill points would make, and the results didn't disappoint them. What a pity. If they didn't have those skill points, Thunderclap wouldn't have lost so badly. Ye Xiu hit the nail on the head. Team Thunderclap often lacked the strength to dominate opponents, so they usually won through meticulously studying their opponents and finding a strategy to win. As a result, no one ever underestimated Thunderclap. However, this time, Samsara had sudden improvement in skill points. This type of change significantly impacted Thunderclap's plans. As expected, Thunderclap appeared to be underprepared and their tactics didn't seem to be on point. In reality, it was impossible for their tactics to be on point because the data and information used by Xiao Shikin to form the strategy were all wrong. No one but insiders would realize this point. After this match, the only person who would realize this point would be Xiao Shikin himself. In the press conference afterwards, he talked about how the other side had some unexpected improvements. As for what these improvements were, Xiao Shikin probably had a few rough estimates, but he didn't say anything. For the next match, Xiao Shikin said a few words that could be regarded as half-hearted. For the match on the third day, the match between Tiny Herb and Void was actually very intense. The synergy between the Ghost Blade duo of Team Void was immaculate. When Ye Xiu retired this season, the two had received the Best Partner reward in the regular season. In the end, Team Void and the previous champions Team Tiny Herb fought an even match, but despite Team Void having the home field advantage, Team Void was still on the losing side. However, the most intense match would be between Tyranny and Misty Rain. The two teams fought for the longest. In the end, Misty Rain relied on their home field advantage to gather more points. Their second match would only be more intense. After Ye Xiu watched this match, he was quite baffled. Han Wenqing isn't performing too well. His longtime rival unexpectedly made him feel like he was a Stranger the King's avatar. Chapter 640. Really? Wei Chen heard Ye Xiu's remark and asked. Han Wenqing had been playing since the beginning of the professional scene, so Wei Chen obviously knew him. They had fought against each other many a time before, but it had been many years since then, and no matter how deep of an impression he had of him, there was no way it could compare to the deep rivalry that existed between Ye Xiu and Han Wenqing. Ye Xiu had noticed a problem, but he hadn't noticed anything wrong at all. In his eyes, the two sides had fought intensely. It was a very high skill match, and he hadn't seen any issues with Tyranny's ace player, Han Wenqing. I guess he's not playing badly, but something doesn't feel right, Ye Xiu said. What doesn't feel right? Wei Chen immediately asked. He wasn't nervous for no reason. As a retired pro player, his reaction speed and hand speed was declining, but he was certainly still at a pro level in terms of experience, knowledge, and perceptiveness. I can't say exactly right now. Ye Xiu furrowed his brow and shook his head. Happy Internet Cafe would, without question, stream the playoffs, but they were currently watching it in the practice room. Because of their differences in skill levels, their discussions were at a different level. Ye Xiu and Wei Chen gave their opinions on the matches. Chen Guo knew a bit more about the game, so she could understand some of what they were saying. As for Tang Ru and Steamed Bun, they had only played for several months already, but weren't complete noobs anymore. However, if they had to discuss the very fine details of the match, the two probably wouldn't be able to keep up. The two were at a complete loss when Ye Xiu said that something was wrong with Han Wenqing. Both of them looked at Ye Xiu, waiting for him to continue. Ye Xiu didn't say anything further, though. The stream was already showing the post-match interview. Tyranny and Misty Rain hadn't made any major mistakes. Both teams had gone all out that match, and neither team would feel too regretful if they lost. The interviewed players practically said the same thing. They expressed their confidence in their respective teams, praised their opponents, and spoke of their faith in being able to win the next match, etc. Tyranny's captain Han Wenqing naturally participated in the interview. Because Ye Xiu had specially called him out, everyone else paid close attention to what he said and also stared at his facial expressions. However, everything seemed to be normal. It didn't look like there was anything abnormal with Han Wenqing's condition. When the interview ended and the stream went offline, everyone turned to look at Ye Xiu, waiting for him to say something. Ye Xiu only shook his head and returned to his computer. Everyone else returned to their seats too. Wei Chen went back to his seat and saw that Ye Xiu still seemed to be thinking hard. He didn't bother him and handed him a cigarette instead. Ye Xiu received it and quietly lit it. He still didn't say anything. He opened up a web browser and typed in a few words. Wei Chen watched from over his shoulder and saw that it was a site for downloading VODs. It seemed like Ye Xiu was planning on studying the match. However, since the match just ended, it would take some time before it would be uploaded. Seeing that it couldn't be downloaded yet, Ye Xiu opened up a folder and began looking through Tyranny's previous matches. He watched match after match, closely spectating Han Wenqing's Desert Smoke. Ye Xiu gradually began to relax. Soon afterwards, he went back to the site and downloaded the most recent match. Wei Chen had been paying attention to Ye Xiu's actions the entire time, so when he saw the change in expression, he asked, "Did you figure it out?" "Pretty much," Ye Xiu replied. Chen Guo went over and asked, "What's the situation?" "He's changing," Ye Xiu said. "Changing?" "Yeah, he's changing his habits and striker movements. He's researching a new style of playing his class," Ye Xiu said. "He really refuses to give up," Wei Chen sighed. Creating a new style wasn't an easy task. Even though every few levels brought new skills or new equipment, there was always a certain amount of variance, but the change from these new skills or equipment could only be considered adjustments. They wouldn't cause a player to significantly change his or her playstyle. The classes in Glory were very balanced, so updates didn't bring much change to a class core. If Ye Xiu said someone of Han Wenqing's caliber was researching a new playstyle, it wasn't going to be just a simple numbers adjustment. A slight adjustment like that wasn't anything difficult for a pro player to adapt to. It wouldn't be something that Ye Xiu would be so surprised about either. Han Wenqing was clearly trying to do something completely different. Soon afterwards, Ye Xiu finished downloading the VOD. Ye Xiu immediately replayed it. Wei Chen also watched. Even though Tang Ru and Steamed Bun were interested, it wasn't something they would be able to comprehend. To put it plainly, Pro players specialized in PvP. The biggest difference between PvP and PvE was how deep one's understanding of all the classes were, whether it was your class or any other class. What skills, combos, playstyles, strategy, etc. were all something that pro players needed to know very thoroughly. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun were quite familiar with their respective classes, but their understanding of other classes was still limited. Let alone someone trying to create a new playstyle, let alone them. Even Chen Guo wouldn't be able to say much. Sure enough, Chen Guo was also at a complete loss when Ye Xiu paused and commented on a segment, but this time, she felt gratified that even Wei Chen was at a loss too. See here. After watching several of Desert Smoke's matches, Ye Xiu had grasped the general line of thinking and pointed out the changes in his playstyle. If this had happened in the past, he would have most likely stepped forward and began pushing forward using reinforced iron bones or jumped backwards and sent a whirlwind kick back. Instead, he stepped sideways and used a collapsing fist. It seems like he plans on initiating with an empty-handed block. I've never seen him do something like that before. Really? Wei Chen was really at a loss because Ye Xiu's comment had been too detailed and random. Every player would react differently depending on each situation. How could Ye Xiu guess all of that? Over here too. Not waiting for Wei Chen to understand, Ye Xiu pointed at another place. Here, don't you think this dual tiger fists is too sudden? Really, I feel like it's a good choice. Wei Chen continued to be at a loss. The screen was currently playing the most recent match between Misty Rain and Tyranny. Two melee characters closed in under the protection of the bombardment by Chu Yunxiu's Windy Rain. However, Desert Smoke closed in on them faster and sent the two flying away with a dual tiger fists. Cloud Body dual tiger fists. Isn't that a common combo? Wei Chen said. Cloud Body was a movement skill for strikers. Cloud Body followed by dual tiger fists was called Cloud Body dual tiger fists. It was one of the most commonly used striker combos. Cloud Body was used a bit later, but dual tiger fists was used a bit earlier, Ye Xiu said. Wei Chen rewatched the segment twice and then gave up. Okay, who else here actually sees that? Wei Chen looked towards Chen Guo, who shook her head too. Cloud Body dual tiger fists was a common combo that she also knew about, but everyone used it slightly differently. Han Wenking's usage of the combo seemed to have a good effect, but she couldn't see anything weird about it. If it was before, he would have never played like this. Ye Xiu said. How did he do it before? Wei Chen asked. Is it better or worse now? Chen Guo asked. Ye Xiu only shook his head. I can't say. It seems like he's still figuring it out too. Ye Xiu continued to watch and found several other segments to talk about, but Wei Chen and Chen Guo were completely at a loss. They listened and got a general understanding of the changes. Han Wenking's changes were in the small details. Some of the places were just his intentions, but Ye Xiu could actually see through these intentions and analyze them. He's a bit late here. That's not something he would have done in the past. He's probably thinking of, in the end. Chen Guo couldn't help but feel moved after hearing Ye Xiu come to these conclusions. The person who understands you the best is your enemy. This saying really isn't wrong. Not wrong at all. Wei Chen nodded his head. He wasn't nervous anymore. Not being able to see what Ye Xiu was seeing wasn't an issue with his skill level, but rather his understanding of Han Wenking himself. Ye Xiu was also nicknamed Glory's Encyclopedia, and he probably had a better understanding of the various classes, apart from warlocks, than Wei Chen. And from the sounds of it, Han Wenking's new playstyle wasn't something at a fundamental level. If not, a new skill combo would have easily been noticed by any experienced player, let alone a pro, but for these minute changes, there were very few people besides Ye Xiu who would notice them. At the post-match interview, Misty Rain's players never mentioned this change. It meant that Han Wenking was still in the midst of changing it. Once he figured this out, Wei Chen didn't want to watch any further. He patted Ye Xiu and said, "You should have little Tang and steamed bun listen to your chatter. It'll definitely increase their understanding of strikers. Those two need to improve in this area." Ye Xiu heard his advice and nodded his head. The king's avatar,